In the silent night, a splosh echoed from the experimental pool, followed by ripples of silver gleaming like traces of the impossible. The Helios 9 research station stood isolated on a desolate island in the year 2187. Around it, the night sea was dark, rain drizzled persistently, and wind howled in gusts. Within this remote outpost, Ethan Blake, the chief technician, about 32 years old, taciturn and devoted to his work, performed his routine patrol. Pool 47, the biological testing basin, had been designed with significant depth to facilitate physiological studies of extraterrestrial species. As Ethan checked the lighting systems, wiring, and completed his nightly reports, monotonous but critical work, the atmosphere remained quiet, disturbed only by the wind and the soft hum of water pumps. That night, something changed. An unexpected splash came from the testing pool in the middle of the night. Ethan detected a small hand with silvery skin, flashing briefly on the water's surface before sinking out of sight. Without hesitation, he threw off his jacket and jumped into the pool, diving deep to attempt a rescue. There, he discovered an extraterrestrial being, a small, silver-colored girl, unconscious, tangled in a mesh of cables. Ethan pulled the child to the shore, administering first aid using emergency skills he had learned for extraterrestrial beings. He then led the little girl, temporarily named Ocean, to an old storage room, providing food and blankets for warmth. While tending to her, Ethan noticed a collar around her neck marked Unit 481, an indication that she was either a detained subject or an experiment. This discovery sparked his curiosity. Who had released her into the pool? Why was she here? The following day, 3 employees dressed in black, later identified as hunters, appeared under the guise of Clearance 9 inspectors, but their actual mission was to track down escaped extraterrestrial beings. Ethan guided them through various laboratory rooms, using the excuse that area is malfunctioning and could cause injury to prevent them from reaching Ocean. As a tentative bond formed between them, Ethan attempted basic communication. "My name is Ethan. Don't you have a name?" He showed Ocean his own face in a mirror. In response, Ocean drew pictures of the pool, submerged cages, expressing fear and painful memories. Ethan began to understand. Ocean wasn't just a child. She had been moved from cage to cage, sold or experimented upon. The trauma of imprisonment made her tremble in every dark corner. Later, Ethan led Ocean back to the now empty testing pool. When Ocean touched the water's surface, it immediately glowed blue, with luminous characters rising like a guiding map. Astonished, Ethan recorded the strange symbols on his tablet. He realized Ocean was trying to communicate. "Earth is not my home. I come from a star region no one has yet visited." Their moment of discovery was interrupted when an automated alien hunting device, a retriever, detected Ocean's energy signature and invaded the station. Ocean, surprisingly confident for the first time, began singing underwater, creating sound waves that short-circuited the retriever's mechanical systems, causing it to malfunction instantly. Ethan quickly pulled Ocean from the pool, realizing she was the source of an ancient power. Knowing more retrievers would come, Ethan rode Ocean to the forest, hiding in an abandoned cave. Inside, they discovered an old shuttle, seemingly useless, meant only for display. When Ocean touched the control panel, it partially activated, powered by technology she had previously installed. A second, larger retriever suddenly broke through the cave wall and charged in. Ethan had a rusty EMP device, but wasn't sure if it would be effective. Ocean began to sing, her voice echoing through the cave, creating powerful energy waves similar to those she had demonstrated at the pool. The retriever's machinery shook, short-circuited, and finally shattered into pieces, Metal debris scattered throughout the cave, challenging the atmosphere and shaking the ground. Ethan and Ocean stood amidst it all, feeling both relief and concern, understanding that the pursuit was far from over. Using components from his hoverbike and tools he had brought along, Ethan worked with Ocean to restore the shuttle's engine. The process was grueling, but demonstrated their growing bond. Ocean revealed her true significance. She wasn't merely a refugee, but a key, or vessel, protecting the remnants of the water civilization, Deephorn. Now, the spatial gateway would open only for her. On the night before leaving Earth, they sat at the cave entrance gazing at the star-filled sky. Ocean explained that the concept of home was no longer just a planet, but a person, Ethan himself. The shuttle departed from its temporary launch pad, crossing the atmosphere. Earth viewed from above looked peaceful, but Ethan knew other retrievers were coming. The story concludes with an open ending. The shuttle speeds into space, heading toward an unmapped star cluster. Earth gradually disappears beneath the blue atmosphere, while Ethan and Ocean journey toward an unknown future. The night shift at Helios 9 station was never what anyone would call exciting. Ethan Blake preferred it that way. The quieter, the better. He'd spent enough years in high-pressure environments, enough time with constant chattering and meaningless social interactions. Out here, on this remote island facility, with its perpetual mist and the distant crash of waves against sheer cliffs, he'd found something close to peace. Tonight was like any other. Damp air seeping through the station's climate control, creating that distinctive metallic smell that always reminded him of old batteries. The soft blue emergency lights traced paths along otherwise darkened corridors, casting everything in a submarine glow. The hum of the ventilation system and distant machinery provided the only soundtrack to his routine patrol. Ethan moved methodically through his checklist, tablet in hand. Temperature readings in the biohazard containment units, pressure gauges on the oxygen recyclers, security protocols for the overnight lockdown. Nothing required genuine attention. It was the same repetitive motions he'd performed hundreds of times before. His footsteps echoed softly against polished floors as he approached the central research wing. Here, the security level jumped 3 tiers. His keycard slid through the reader with a quiet beep. The door hissing open to reveal the station's crown jewel, Pool 47. Unlike most of the station's cold, metallic aesthetic, the testing pool room had been designed with an almost artistic sensibility. The circular chamber housed a pool 15 meters in diameter, its depths illuminated from below with pale green lighting. The water itself was a carefully calibrated mix of Earth's ocean chemistry and compounds found on 6 other worlds. It could sustain virtually any aquatic life form they'd encountered, a universal medium for biological testing. Ethan had never much cared for what happened in this room during daylight hours. The experiments, the data collection, the endless scientific debates. None of it concerned him. He was infrastructure, maintenance, background, the invisible hand that kept everything functioning, while others claimed credit for discovery. He approached the control panel beside the pool, verifying systems were in standby mode. All readings normal. Water temperature at precisely 19.7 degrees Celsius. Salinity at 3.8%. Oxygen content stable. Outside, rain began to fall more heavily, drumming against the reinforced glass dome overhead. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the water's surface, casting sharp shadows. Ethan glanced upward, watching the rain streak across the glass like tears. "Security check complete," he murmured to himself, making a final notation on his tablet. "Pool 47 secure. Systems nominal." He turned to leave, the door already sliding open before him, when something caught his ear, a sound so faint he nearly missed it beneath the rain and mechanical background noise. A splash, small but distinctive. Ethan froze, turning slowly back toward the pool. The surface remained calm, reflecting the green lights below, showing no disturbance. He waited, counting seconds in his head. Nothing. Must have been the ventilation system playing tricks, or perhaps a drop of condensation from the dome. He turned again, to leave. Then came another sound. Not a splash this time, but something else. A soft, high-pitched sound like nothing he'd ever heard before. Almost like a child's whimper, but with a strange, metallic undertone. Approaching the edge of the pool cautiously, Ethan crouched down, peering into the gently illuminated depths. The water was clear enough to see several meters down, but darkness consumed whatever lay at the bottom. He saw nothing unusual. "Hello?" he called, feeling immediately foolish, as if anything in there would understand him or respond. 3 seconds passed, 5, 10. Then a hand broke the surface, small, delicate, with 5 slender fingers that caught the light in a way human skin never could. It shimmered silver blue, glistening with water droplets that seemed to cling to it more densely than they would to human flesh. The hand reached upward, grasping at nothing, before sinking back beneath the surface. Ethan's training told him to call security, to notify the research team, to log an incident report, and maintain distance until proper protocols could be established. Instead, he was already kicking off his boots, unclipping his utility belt, shrugging out of his jacket. Some long dormant instinct had taken control, bypassing every regulation and protocol he'd internalized over years of service. The water was colder than he expected as he dove in, its strange chemical composition feeling somehow thicker than normal water. The salinity stung his eyes, but he kept them open, kicking downward toward the pool's center, where he'd seen the hand. The green illumination from below created an eerie, shifting landscape of light and shadow. As he descended, he could make out cables and monitoring equipment anchored to the pool's floor, creating a maze of technology. Among those cables, something moved. Ethan swam deeper, his lungs already beginning to burn. There, tangled among a web of monitoring wires and data cables, was a small figure. Not human. That much was immediately clear, though humanoid in basic form. A child-sized being with skin that seemed to reflect light, like polished metal, struggling weakly against the cables that had ensnared it. As he approached, the being turned toward him. Ethan nearly gasped, losing precious air. Its face was startlingly beautiful, almost human, but with features of impossible symmetry and eyes that were entirely silver, without iris or pupil. Those eyes widened at the sight of him, and the struggling increased. With careful movements, Ethan began working to free the small figure. The cables had wrapped around its limbs, one particularly tight across the chest, restricting movement. He worked methodically, unwinding each restraint, conscious of his own lungs screaming for air. The being had stopped struggling, watching him with those unreadable silver eyes. When the final cable was removed, Ethan gripped the small form gently and kicked upward, his vision beginning to darken around the edges. They broke the surface together, Ethan gasping desperately for air. He swam one arm to the pool's edge, lifting the small figure onto the deck before pulling himself up. Water pooled beneath them both as he turned his attention to the alien child. No. She, Ethan realized with certainty he couldn't explain, lay motionless. Her chest didn't rise or fall with breath. The silvery skin had taken on a dull, matte appearance. Ethan's mind raced. CPR? Would that even work on a species with potentially different respiratory systems? But what choice did he have? Recalling his xenobiology emergency training, he modified the standard procedure. 2 fingers instead of a palm for chest compressions, lighter pressure, a different placement over what he hoped was the equivalent of a heart. No mouth-to-mouth. Too risky with unknown biology. "Come on," he whispered, working steadily. "Breathe." After 30 seconds, that felt like hours, the small body convulsed suddenly, A burst of clear fluid ejected from what must have been lungs, and those silver eyes flew open. The alien child rolled to her side, expelling more fluid, before her breathing stabilized into small, rapid gasps. Ethan sat back on his heels, heart pounding with relief and lingering adrenaline. Those silver eyes found his, and for a moment, they simply stared at one another. Recognition passed between them, not of identity, but of intention. She knew he had saved her. He knew she understood. A distant sound broke the moment. Voices from the corridor. The night shift security team, making their rounds. "We need to move," Ethan whispered, though he doubted she understood his words. "It's not safe here." Without waiting for a response that might never come, he scooped up the small figure. She was surprisingly light, perhaps half the weight he would expect from a human child of similar size, and cold. Her body temperature seemed significantly lower than human norm, though whether that was her natural state or a result of nearly drowning, he couldn't tell. He moved swiftly to a maintenance access panel near the floor, sliding it open one-handed. The service tunnels would allow them to bypass the main corridors and security cameras. Carrying the alien child, he crawled into the narrow passage, pulling the panel closed behind them. The tunnels were cramped and dusty, lit only by the faint glow of his tablet. The alien child remained perfectly still in his arms, those silver eyes reflecting the screen's light as she watched him navigate the maze of maintenance shafts. Ethan had no plan beyond immediate escape from discovery. Each passing second brought new awareness of what he'd done, violated at least 17 station protocols, potentially committed crimes under the Extraterrestrial Protection and Containment Act, certainly jeopardized his position and possibly his freedom. And yet, looking down at the small silver face watching him with a mixture of fear and wonder, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. After 10 minutes of crawling through maintenance tunnels, they emerged into a storage area in the station's older section. Once the primary research hub, this wing had been largely abandoned when the new facilities were constructed 3 years ago. It housed outdated equipment, spare parts, and various items deemed not worth relocating but too expensive to discard. Perfect for hiding. Ethan set the alien child down on a tarp-covered crate, quickly surveying their surroundings. The room was cluttered but secure, with only one entrance and no surveillance equipment. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim blue glow. "You'll be safe here," he said, knowing his words meant nothing to her, but hoping his tone conveyed reassurance. "Let me find you something dry." He rummaged through storage containers, eventually locating a set of clean microfiber towels used for delicate equipment. Returning to the alien child, he offered one, cautiously. She hadn't moved from where he'd placed her, water still dripping from her slight form. After a moment's hesitation, she reached for the towel with those delicate silver fingers. The movement was graceful, despite her obvious weakness. As she awkwardly attempted to dry herself, Ethan noticed a band around her neck that he'd initially mistaken for an anatomical feature. Upon closer inspection, it was clearly artificial. A narrow collar of dark material embedded with tiny lights, and what appeared to be a tracking module. Etched into its surface were the characters Unit 481. A wave of cold anger washed over him. Not a name, a designation, a number. The alien child. No. He refused to think of her as Unit 481, caught him staring at the collar. Her hand rose to touch it, and a shudder passed through her small frame. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. "I don't know how to remove it safely." She tilted her head slightly, those silver eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him wonder if she understood more than he thought. "You need a name," he continued, partly to fill the silence, partly because talking helped him think. "I can't just call you her or the alien in my head." The silver child blinked slowly, still watching him. "Since I found you in the water," he mused. "How about ocean? just until we figure things out." The newly christened Ocean gave no indication whether she approved of the name, or even understood she'd been given one. She had finished with the towel, and now sat perfectly still, those remarkable eyes never leaving his face. Ethan checked his tablet. 4 hours until the morning shift arrived. 4 hours to figure out what to do next. "Are you hungry?" he asked, pantomiming eating. "Thirsty?" He mimicked drinking. Ocean stared blankly. "Right," Ethan sighed. "Let's try something basic." He found a clean container and filled it with purified water from a supply tank. Returning to Ocean, he demonstrated drinking a small amount before offering the container to her. She accepted it cautiously, sniffing the liquid before taking a tentative sip. Her reaction was immediate, silver eyes widening as she began to drink more eagerly. Whatever her species, water appeared to be essential. While she drank, Ethan assessed their situation. He couldn't keep her hidden in a storage room indefinitely. Sooner or later, her absence would be noticed, assuming she was part of an official research program. The caller suggested as much, though something about this felt wrong. If she was an authorized test subject, why was she alone in Pool 47 in the middle of the night? Ocean finished drinking and returned the container to him. As she did, her stomach emitted a sound not unlike a human growl. "Hungry too, huh?" Ethan nodded. "I'll find something." He retrieved his emergency ration pack from his discarded utility belt. The sealed packets contained universally digestible nutrients, developed for human space travelers, but tested safe for most carbon-based life forms. Ocean accepted the offered food cube with the same caution she'd shown toward the water. After a careful sniff, she took a small bite. She seemed neither pleased nor displeased by the taste, but continued eating methodically. While she ate, Ethan examined her more carefully. Her silver-hued skin wasn't simply a different pigmentation. It seemed to have different properties altogether, reflecting light in ways human skin couldn't. Her basic anatomy appeared humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with recognizable features, but the proportions were slightly different. Longer limbs, a more delicate structure. No visible hair, though her head was covered with what looked like extremely fine, metallic filaments that moved slightly, as though in a gentle current. Most striking were her eyes, entirely silver, with no discernible pupil or iris, yet clearly capable of sight and expression. They followed his movements with alert intelligence. "Who are you?" Ethan murmured. "And what were you doing in that pool?" Ocean finished eating and set the wrapper aside with careful precision. Then, to Ethan's surprise, she raised a hand and pointed directly at him. "Me?" he asked, touching his chest. She continued, pointing insistently. "I'm Ethan," he said, tapping his chest. "Ethan." Ocean lowered her hand, then slowly raised it to her own chest. But instead of speaking, she simply stared at him, as if waiting. "Ocean," Ethan said, pointing to her. "I'm calling you Ocean." She tilted her head, silver eyes blinking once, slowly. Then she raised her hand again, this time pointing around the room, at the walls, the ceiling, the floor, her finger moving in a circular motion. "The station," Ethan guessed. "Helios 9? Ocean shook her head, a surprisingly human gesture, and pointed more specifically at the floor, then the walls, making a box shape with her hands. "A room? A box?" Ethan frowned, trying to understand. "A cage?" At that word, Ocean's body went rigid. Her silver eyes widened, and the fine filaments on her head stood on end. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small and very afraid. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quickly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "You're safe here. No cage." Ocean remained tense, watching him with new wariness. Ethan cursed himself for his clumsiness. Whatever this child had experienced, it clearly involved confinement. "Let me show you something," he said. searching through the storage containers until he found what he was looking for. An old, manual interface tablet with a drawing program still installed. He cleared the screen and handed it to Ocean, demonstrating how to use the stylus to draw. "Show me," he encouraged. "Show me what you're trying to say." After a moment's hesitation, Ocean took the stylus in her delicate fingers. With surprising dexterity, she began to draw. First, a rectangle. A pool, Ethan realized. Then beneath it, smaller rectangles with lines crossing them. Cages or tanks, submerged below the water's surface. Finally, small figures inside the cages. Stick figures with elongated limbs, not unlike her own. Ethan felt sick. "There are others like you? In cages under the pool?" Ocean shook her head again, erasing the drawing with a swipe of her hand. She began anew, this time drawing a series of different containment units, connected by lines, with arrows showing movement between them. In each new container, she drew herself, indicated by a small mark on the neck that must represent the collar. "You've been moved," Ethan interpreted, "from place to place, cage to cage." Ocean nodded, the movement so human it startled him. She was learning, adapting to his communication methods with remarkable speed. She continued drawing, adding larger stick figures next to the containers. Human figures, Ethan realized, though she drew them with disproportionately large hands. His stomach twisted as understanding dawned. "They've been experimenting on you, selling you, trading you between facilities." Ocean set down the stylus, those silver eyes meeting his directly. In them, Ethan saw confirmation, and something more, a depth of awareness and comprehension that no test subject should possess. Whatever this being was, she was no simple specimen. She understood exactly what had been done to her. "I won't let them take you back," he found himself saying, the words emerging before he'd consciously formed the thought. "We'll figure this out." Ocean blinked those remarkable eyes, and for the first time, her expression changed. The fear remained, but alongside it appeared something new, a cautious, fragile hope. Dawn approached with alarming speed. Ethan knew the morning shift would arrive in less than 2 hours, and with them would come the full activation of the station's security systems. He needed to establish a more secure hiding place for Ocean and create a plausible explanation for his own appearance and behavior. "We need to move somewhere safer," he explained, gathering the few supplies he'd managed to collect. "And I need to change into dry clothes and report for end of shift." Ocean watched him with that unnerving intensity, but made no move to follow. When Ethan gestured for her to come, she remained perfectly still, those silver eyes darting toward the door. "It's okay," he reassured her, understanding her fear. "I'll keep you safe." Still, she hesitated. Then, with deliberate movements, she picked up the tablet and began drawing again. This time, she sketched a figure that appeared to be herself, the collar prominently displayed. Beside the drawing, she carefully traced a series of lines and curves that Ethan recognized as some form of writing. Not human script, but clearly a language. "Is that your language?" he asked, fascinated despite their urgent situation. Ocean nodded, then pointed to the collar, then to the door, making a sweeping gesture with her hand. "The collar," Ethan interpreted. "It's how they track you." Another nod, more emphatic. "So if we leave this room, they might find you through the collar." Ocean touched her nose, then pointed to him, another surprisingly human gesture that she must have observed and internalized. "Smart thinking," Ethan muttered. "Let me see what I can do." He examined the collar more carefully, searching for a clasp or release mechanism. The material was unlike anything he'd encountered. Not quite metal, not quite composite, with an almost organic quality to it. The tiny lights embedded within pulsed with a regular rhythm that might correspond to heartbeat or some other biological function. "I don't want to damage you," Ethan said, withdrawing his hands. "I don't know how this connects to your systems." Ocean frowned, then made a tugging motion at the collar. "You want it off?" She nodded vigorously. "Even if it might hurt you?" Another nod, her expression resolute. Ethan considered the options. His toolkit included precision instruments capable of cutting most materials, but without knowing how the collar interfaced with Ocean's physiology, he risked injuring her. On the other hand, leaving it in place meant they could be tracked wherever they went. "Let me try something less invasive first," he decided. From his toolkit, he extracted a signal dampener, a small device designed to temporarily disrupt wireless communications during delicate technical work. It couldn't block a signal indefinitely, but it might buy them enough time to reach a more secure location. "This might feel strange," he warned, activating the device and carefully positioning it near the collar. The effect was immediate. The lights on the collar dimmed, and Ocean's entire body relaxed, as though a constant tension had suddenly released. She touched the collar with an expression of wonder. "It's not permanent," Ethan cautioned, "but it should hide us long enough to move." Ocean nodded her understanding, then stood in a fluid motion that reminded Ethan she was not human, despite her increasingly human-like expressions and gestures. There was an otherworldly grace to her movements, a lightness that defied Earth's gravity. Ethan led her through a series of maintenance passages, avoiding the main corridors where early arriving staff might already be moving about. Their destination was a rarely used observation module at the station's perimeter, originally designed for monitoring sea conditions, but rendered obsolete by newer sensor arrays. The small room offered both privacy and a secondary exit route if needed. Once inside, Ethan secured the door and quickly established the space. A maintenance cabinet yielded emergency blankets that he arranged into a makeshift hiding place behind a defunct console. The room's monitoring systems were offline, meaning no surveillance cameras or motion sensors to worry about. "Stay here," he instructed Ocean, showing her the hiding spot. "I need to change and check in for end of shift. I'll bring more food and water when I return." Ocean settled into the hiding place, drawing the thermal blankets around her slight form. Her silver eyes watched him from the shadows, reflecting what little light penetrated her sanctuary. "I promise I'll come back," Ethan said, feeling a strange need to reassure her. "No one will find you here." Those eyes blinked once, slowly. Acknowledgement. Perhaps even trust. It was a responsibility Ethan hadn't sought, but now felt with unexpected weight. He slipped out through the maintenance access, carefully securing it behind him. The station was beginning to wake, lights brightening to simulate dawn, systems humming with increased activity. Ethan made his way to his quarters, encountering only two bleary-eyed researchers who nodded absently as they passed. In the privacy of his small room, Ethan changed into dry clothing and quickly reviewed his shift notes. Nothing unusual to report, or rather, nothing he could report without revealing what he'd done. He submitted the standard all-clear form, then gathered a few essential supplies, more ration packs, a water purifier, a medical scanner that might provide some insight into Ocean's physiology, and a portable power cell for the signal dampener. He was about to leave when an alert flashed across all station screens. "Attention all personnel. Special inspection team arriving 0800 hours. Clearance level 9, protocol in effect. All staff to report to central briefing." Ethan froze, staring at the message. Clearance level 9 was rarely invoked. It indicated oversight from the highest echelons of the organization that operated Helios 9. Such inspections weren't scheduled months in advance. They arrived without warning, specifically to catch irregularities. Like missing test subjects. "Damn it," Ethan muttered, checking the time. 07:30. 30 minutes until the inspection team arrived, and all staff were required to attend the briefing, including him. He gathered his supplies and slipped out, taking a circuitous route back to the observation module where Ocean waited. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. If the inspection was indeed related to Ocean's disappearance, hiding her on the station suddenly seemed futile. They would search every room, every passage. When he reached the observation module, he found Ocean exactly where he'd left her, though she emerged from hiding as soon as he entered. Those silver eyes immediately registered his tension. "We have a problem," Ethan explained, setting down the supplies. "People are coming. People who might be looking for you." Ocean's reaction confirmed his suspicion. Her entire body seemed to contract, the filaments on her head standing rigid with fear. She made a sound for the first time since he'd rescued her, a soft keening that contained frequencies just at the edge of human hearing. "I won't let them take you," Ethan promised. "But I need to attend a meeting, or they'll be suspicious. You need to stay hidden." He quickly showed her how to operate the water purifier and opened several ration packs. The signal dampener he positioned directly against the collar, securing it with a strip of adhesive. "I'll return as soon as possible," he said. "If anyone besides me tries to enter, there's a maintenance shaft beneath that panel." He indicated a removable floor section. "It leads to the exterior hull. In an emergency, you could... He trailed off, realizing what he was suggesting. The exterior hull meant the outside of the station, surrounded by ocean on all sides. For a human, it would be suicide. But Ocean had survived in Pool 47, which simulated alien aquatic environments. Was it possible? Ocean followed his gaze to the floor panel, then back to his face. She nodded gravely. "Only in an emergency," Ethan emphasized. "I'll be back before you need it." He left reluctantly, feeling those silver eyes on his back until the door closed between them. The central briefing room was already crowded when Ethan arrived, station personnel murmuring anxiously among themselves. Director Hadley, a thin woman with perpetually pursed lips and steel-gray hair, stood at the front, scrolling through information on her tablet with sharp, impatient movements. Ethan found an inconspicuous position near the back, nodding to the few colleagues he was on speaking terms with. Most of the research staff viewed maintenance technicians as little more than walking tool belts, useful when equipment malfunctioned, but otherwise invisible. At precisely 0800, the station's main doors hissed open, and 3 figures entered. They moved with military precision, dressed in identical black uniforms that bore no insignia or identification. Each wore a small earpiece and carried a tablet. Their faces might have been stamped from the same mold. Blank, expressionless, eyes hidden behind reflective glasses despite the station's controlled lighting. Director Hadley stepped forward. "Welcome to Helios 9. I'm Director Hadley. We were not informed of the reason for your inspection." The central figure, slightly taller than the others, inclined his head a fraction. "That is correct. I am Agent Mercer. These are Agents Reed and Cornell. Our authorization." He held up his tablet, displaying a complex authentication code that made Director Hadley's eyes widen slightly. "I see," she said, her voice noticeably cooler. "Shadow Unit, may I ask what brings you to our facility?" "Inventory discrepancy," Agent Mercer replied flatly. "We will require access to all areas, particularly your aquatic testing facilities. All personnel are to continue normal operations, but must be available for questioning." Director Hadley's lips thinned even further, but she nodded. "Of course. Would you like to begin with a facility tour?" "Unnecessary. We have the schematics. We will proceed with our inspection protocols." Ethan felt cold sweat forming along his spine. Inventory discrepancy. They were looking for Ocean, or rather, Unit 481. And judging by Director Hadley's reaction to their authorization, these weren't ordinary inspectors. Shadow Unit operated with almost mythical status among station personnel, a group that handled special assets, with complete autonomy and zero oversight. The briefing concluded quickly, with personnel dismissed to their regular duties, but instructed to remain on station until further notice. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan tried to slip out inconspicuously, already planning the most circuitous route back to Ocean. "Technician!" The word stopped him at the threshold. Turning, Ethan found Agent Reed, the shortest of the three, regarding him from behind those reflective glasses. "Yes, sir." Ethan kept his voice neutral, his face composed. "You are night shift for Pool 47 area?" A direct question. Lying would be logged in their systems instantly. "Yes, sir. I completed my shift at 700 hours. Any irregularities to report?" Again. Direct. Again. Dangerous to lie outright. "Nothing in the systems, sir. All readings remained within established parameters throughout my shift." The agent's head tilted slightly. "In the systems. What about outside the systems?" Ethan maintained his neutral expression through sheer force of will. "Sir, visual observations, sounds, impressions, anything unusual. The storm caused some power fluctuations around 0300 hours, Ethan offered. Nothing significant enough to log, but I monitored until systems stabilized." Agent Reed remained motionless for several seconds, those reflective glasses revealing nothing of the eyes behind them. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Proceed with your duties. Remain available." "Yes, sir." Ethan walked away at a measured pace, resisting the urge to run. They suspected something, or, at the very least, they were casting a wide net, questioning everyone with access to the area's Ocean might have been. Rather than heading directly to the observation module, Ethan forced himself to report to the maintenance center, logging in and reviewing the day's assignments. To his dismay, he found himself tasked with diagnostics in the exact section where he'd hidden Ocean. Coincidence? Or had Agent Reed already flagged him for closer observation? Either way, it provided legitimate reason to be in the area. Ethan gathered the appropriate tools and headed out, taking a deliberately routine pace and path. Twice he passed other staff members being interviewed by the black-clad agents, their expressions ranging from confused to nervous. When he finally reached the observation module, Ethan paused outside, listening carefully. No sound came from within. He entered his access code and stepped inside, immediately closing the door behind him. "Ocean?" he called softly. No response. The hiding place behind the console appeared untouched, the thermal blankets arranged exactly as he'd left them. But no silver eyes peered out from the shadows. Panic rose in Ethan's throat. Had they found her already? Had she fled through the emergency exit? A soft sound from above made him look up. There, improbably balanced in the narrow space between a ceiling panel and a ventilation duct, Ocean was wedged, her slender body contorted in a way that would be impossible for human anatomy. Those silver eyes blinked down at him. "It's safe," Ethan assured her. "It's just me." With a grace that defied gravity, Ocean unfolded herself from the hiding place, dropping silently to the floor beside him. Up close, Ethan could see that the filaments on her head were moving more actively now, almost like underwater plants swaying in a current. "People are looking for you," Ethan said grimly. "3 men in black uniforms. Do you know them?" Ocean's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her entire body seemed to contract, those silver eyes widening with unmistakable terror. She backed away until she hit the wall, then slid down into a protective crouch, arms wrapped around her knees. "They won't find you," Ethan promised, though he felt far less confident than he sounded. "The signal dampener is working. They can't track the caller." Ocean didn't appear reassured. She began rocking slightly, the first tears Ethan had seen sliding down her silver cheeks, droplets that seemed to contain light within them, glimmering as they fell. Something inside Ethan hardened with resolve. Whatever Ocean was, whatever she'd experienced, she was first and foremost a frightened child, And these agents terrified her beyond reason. "Listen to me," he said, kneeling to her level. "I need to continue my work duties, or they'll be suspicious. But tonight, when my shift starts again, we'll find a way to get you off this station, away from them. Do you understand?" Ocean's rocking slowed, her silver eyes, swimming with luminous tears, fixed on his face with that same intense study he'd noticed before. Slowly, she nodded. "Good. You need to stay hidden until then. I'll bring more supplies when I can, but it might not be safe to return until my shift." Ethan stood, checking the signal dampener one last time. The device showed adequate power levels, but wouldn't last indefinitely. Another problem to solve. "I'll be back tonight," he promised, moving toward the door. "Stay hidden." As he reached for the access panel, Ocean made a sudden movement. Her delicate fingers touched his hand, the contact sending an unexpected warmth up his arm. When Ethan turned, surprised, she was looking up at him with an expression he couldn't decipher, something between gratitude and warning. She pointed to her eyes, then to his, then made a circular motion encompassing the room, finishing by touching her collar. "They're watching?" Ethan guessed. "They can see?" Ocean shook her head slightly, frustrated. She repeated the gesture, this time more deliberately touching her own eyes, then pointing to the reflective glasses the agents had worn. "Their glasses," Ethan frowned. "They can see something with those glasses?" Ocean nodded vigorously, pointing again to her collar. Understanding dawned. "The collar emits something they can see with those glasses, something the dampener might not block." Another emphatic nod. "Infrared? Ultraviolet?" Ethan's mind raced through possibilities. "Some kind of energy signature?" Ocean simply looked at him, unable to provide the specific answer. But the warning was clear enough. The signal dampener might block conventional tracking, but the agents had additional methods. "I'll be careful," Ethan assured her. "And tonight, we'll get that collar off completely." With a final glance at Ocean, now retreating to her hiding place among the thermal blankets, Ethan left the observation module, carefully securing the door behind him. The rest of the day passed in a state of perpetual tension. Ethan performed his assigned maintenance tasks with mechanical precision, his mind constantly returning to Ocean and the agents searching for her. Twice more he encountered them in the corridors, their reflective glasses sweeping across areas with methodical thoroughness. By the time his night shift began, Ethan had formulated the outline of a plan. Not a good plan, certainly not a safe one, but the only option he could see. The agents had focused their search on the station's newer sections, particularly around Pool 47. The abandoned areas, including the old docking bay that now served as storage, had received only cursory examination. If he could move Ocean there, they might access one of the station's emergency vessels, small watercraft designed for short-range evacuation to the island's shore. From there, well, he hadn't thought that far ahead yet. One impossible step at a time. As Ethan made his way through his usual start-of-shift routine, he gathered supplies with careful nonchalance, a more powerful signal dampener from the communications array, tools that might help with removing the collar, a portable navigation unit that wouldn't connect to the station's network. When he finally reached the observation module, he found it apparently empty. His heart sank until a soft sound from the ceiling made him look up. Ocean had returned to her improbable hiding place, wedged into a space barely large enough for her slender form. "It's safe," Ethan called softly. "We need to move." Ocean descended in that same gravity-defying manner, landing beside him without sound. Her silver eyes immediately went to the bundle of supplies he carried. "We're going to try something," Ethan explained, setting down his gathered materials. "First, let's see if we can remove that collar." He activated the more powerful signal dampener, positioning it carefully near the collar's control module. The small lights embedded in the device immediately dimmed, and Ocean's posture relaxed noticeably. working with delicate precision. Ethan examined the collar's structure more carefully. The material remained puzzling, neither fully metallic nor plastic, with an almost organic quality that seemed to flow subtly beneath his fingers. No obvious fastening mechanism presented itself. "This is beyond any technology I've worked with," he admitted after several minutes. "I'm afraid to cut it without knowing how it connects to your systems." Ocean regarded him for a moment, then raised her hands to the collar herself. Her slender fingers traced patterns across its surface that Ethan couldn't follow, some form of tactile combination or code. After a sequence of these movements, a previously invisible seam appeared along the collar's length. "You know how to open it?" Ethan asked, surprised. Ocean nodded, continuing her intricate finger movements. The seam widened slightly, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath, a network of impossibly fine filaments that extended from the collar into her skin, pulsing with faint light. Ethan sucked in a breath. "It's integrated with your biology. Removing it could hurt you." Ocean's expression remained determined. She continued the unlocking sequence, the seam widening further. As it did, several of the connecting filaments began to retract, pulling back into the collar itself. Others remained stubbornly embedded. Pain flickered across Ocean's features, but she didn't stop. More filaments withdrew, leaving tiny pinpricks of luminescent fluid, blood, or something analogous, where they detached from her skin. "Wait," Ethan said, concern overriding his desire to free her from the tracking device. "You're hurting yourself." Ocean ignored him, her fingers continuing their complex dance across the collar's surface. The remaining filaments began withdrawing, these extractions clearly causing more pain as her face contorted and those strange luminous tears formed in her eyes. Finally, with a soft click, the collar separated completely. Ocean removed it with trembling hands, revealing a ring of small wounds around her neck, each seeping that glowing fluid. "Let me help," Ethan said, reaching for the medical kit he'd brought. Inside was a universal sealant designed for emergency treatment of various species. "This might sting, but it should stop the bleeding." Ocean remained perfectly still as he carefully applied the sealant to each wound. The substance reacted differently with her biology than it would with human tissue, forming a slightly iridescent film over each puncture. The bleeding stopped, though the wounds themselves would need time to heal. With the collar removed, Ethan could see Ocean more completely. Her neck was slender, with subtle anatomical differences from human structure, gill-like slits on either side, currently closed, but clearly functional in aquatic environments. The filaments on her head moved more freely now, responding to air currents in a way that suggested they might serve sensory functions. "Better?" Ethan asked, setting aside the medical supplies. Ocean nodded, touching her neck with an expression of wonder. She held up the removed collar, then deliberately placed it on the floor and pressed her foot against it. The device crumpled with surprising ease, collapsing into components that lost their cohesion without the integrated system intact. "Good riddance," Ethan muttered. "Now, we need to move quickly. I have an idea for getting you off the station, but it's risky." He explained his plan as they gathered their supplies, using maintenance passages to reach the old docking bay, borrowing an emergency vessel, and navigating to the island's far shore, where the agents would be less likely to search immediately. Ocean listened intently, those silver eyes fixed on his face. When he finished, she tilted her head in what Ethan had come to recognize as a questioning gesture. "I know. It's not much of a plan," he admitted. "But it's all I've got right now. Those agents won't give up, and the longer we stay on the station, the more likely they are to find you." Ocean considered this, then gave a decisive nod. She gestured to herself, then to Ethan, then held up 2 fingers pressed together, another surprisingly human gesture of solidarity. "Together," Ethan agreed. "Let's go." They moved through the maintenance passages with careful speed. Ethan, leading the way with his tablet's dim light, Ocean following with silent grace. The station's night cycle meant minimal personnel in the corridors, but they still avoided main pathways, taking the longest but least populated routes toward the old docking bay. Twice they froze at the sound of voices. Once a pair of researchers working late. Once a security patrol. Each time, Ocean demonstrated an uncanny ability to find hiding places where none seemed to exist. Her flexible physiology, allowing her to compress into spaces Ethan would have thought impossible. After nearly 40 minutes of this cautious progress, they reached the sealed doors of the original docking facility. Ethan entered his maintenance override code, holding his breath until the ancient mechanism rumbled to life, the doors parting with a groan of disuse. The space beyond was cavernous and dimly lit, emergency lighting casting long shadows across abandoned equipment and vessels in various states of disrepair. What had once been Helios 9's primary connection to the outside world now served as little more than a nautical graveyard. "We need to find one that still works," Ethan whispered, though there was no one to overhear them. "Something small and simple." They moved through the bay, examining the vessels. Most were hopelessly obsolete or cannibalized for parts. But toward the rear of the facility, Ethan spotted what they needed: a two-person emergency skiff, designed for rapid evacuation in case of station breach. Its systems were basic enough that it wouldn't require network authorization to launch, and its power cells, while not fully charged, showed sufficient capacity for a short journey. This one, Ethan decided, running his hands over the craft's controls. "It'll get us to shore." Ocean approached the vessel cautiously, those silver eyes examining every detail. She placed a hand against its hull, head tilted, as though listening to something Ethan couldn't hear. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Ocean shook her head, continuing her strange communion with the craft. After several seconds, she looked up at Ethan and nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. Now we just need to—" A sudden alarm cut through the silence, so loud in the enclosed space that Ethan physically recoiled. Red emergency lights began pulsing throughout the facility, and the station's automated voice echoed through the intercoms. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel implement lockdown protocols." Repeat. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel implement lockdown protocols." Ethan's blood ran cold. Sector 7 was where they'd just been, the observation module and surrounding areas. "They've found the collar," he realized aloud. "They know you've escaped it." Ocean's reaction was immediate, those silver eyes widening with fear, the filaments on her head standing rigid. She made a sharp gesture toward the skiff, her meaning clear. "Go now." "Right," Ethan agreed, his hands moving across the vessel's control panel with practiced efficiency. The craft hummed to life, its systems initializing with reassuring green indicators. "Get in." Ocean climbed aboard with that same fluid grace, settling into the passenger seat as Ethan continued the launch sequence. The docking bay doors hadn't been opened in years. Would the mechanism still function? He entered the emergency override, holding his breath as ancient hydraulics groaned to life. Water began to flood the small launch chamber as the exterior doors slowly parted, allowing access to the open ocean beyond. The skiff rose on the incoming water, its hull designed to maintain stability in precisely these conditions. Ethan gripped the controls, ready to power forward the moment sufficient clearance existed. Just as the doors reached half-open position, a new alarm sounded, this one sharper, more urgent. "Unauthorized launch sequence detected. Docking bay security protocols engaged. All launches suspended." The doors ground to a halt, then began to reverse direction, slowly closing once more. "No!" Ethan slammed his hand against the control panel, searching desperately for another override. Nothing responded. The security protocols had locked him out completely. Ocean touched his arm, drawing his attention. Her expression was strangely calm now, those silver eyes holding a certainty that hadn't been there before. She pointed to the control panel, then to herself. "You can override it?" Ethan asked, disbelief warring with desperate hope. Ocean nodded once, firmly. She placed her hands on the control panel, fingers splaying across its surface. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, to Ethan's astonishment, a soft blue glow began to emanate from beneath her palms, spreading through the circuitry of the panel like luminescent veins. The station's alarms faltered, the red emergency lights flickering, as though affected by a power surge. The closing doors shuddered to a stop once more, then began reopening, more rapidly than before. "How are you?" Ethan began, but Ocean's expression of intense concentration silenced him. Whatever she was doing required her complete focus. The doors reached full extension, revealing the dark waters beyond. Without waiting for explanation, Ethan engaged the skiff's propulsion, sending them surging forward into the open ocean. Behind them, the facility's lights continued to flicker and fail, buying precious seconds before pursuit could be organized. As they cleared the station's immediate perimeter, Ethan risked a glance at Ocean. She had removed her hands from the control panel, the blue glow fading from both the circuitry and her skin. She looked drained but satisfied, those silver eyes now fixed on the water around them. "Thank you," Ethan said simply, "though I have about 1,000 questions about what you just did." Ocean's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, the first Ethan had seen from her. She gestured to the navigation controls, then pointed toward the horizon, away from the station's island. "Right, getting away comes first, questions later." Ethan set course for the far side of the island, pushing the small craft to its limits. The night was clear now, the earlier storm having passed, leaving a sky brilliant with stars above and a sea dark as ink below. Behind them, Helios 9 gleamed like a fallen constellation, its lights reflecting across the water's surface. They had traveled perhaps 2 kilometers when Ocean suddenly stiffened, her attention snapping toward the sky behind them. Ethan followed her gaze and felt his heart sink. A small aircraft had launched from the station's upper level, sleek, dark, and moving with ominous purpose in their direction. "They're coming," he said unnecessarily, "and they're faster than we are." Ocean's expression hardened. She stood in the small craft, balancing with impossible steadiness despite the vessel's movement through the waves. Her gaze remained fixed on the approaching aircraft as she raised her arms slowly, palms facing upward. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, dividing his attention between her strange behavior and guiding the skiff. Ocean didn't respond verbally, but the change in her was unmistakable. The filaments on her head began to move with greater animation, not responding to air currents now, but seeming to generate their own motion. The silver quality of her skin intensified, reflecting starlight with unnatural brilliance. Most startling were her eyes, no longer merely silver, but glowing with an inner light that cast faint illumination across her features. Then she began to sing. The sound defied description. Not quite music as Ethan understood it, not quite language, but something that incorporated elements of both while transcending ordinary definitions. The notes seemed to vibrate at frequencies that shifted between audible and something just beyond human perception, creating harmonics that made the air itself feel charged with energy. As Ocean sang, the water around their small vessel began to respond. Bioluminescent organisms normally dwelling in deeper waters rose toward the surface, creating patterns of light that mirrored the sounds she produced. The waves themselves seemed to alter their natural rhythm, forming concentric circles that radiated outward from their position. The approaching aircraft faltered, its smooth trajectory becoming erratic as it encountered the expanding rings of... what? Energy? Sound made visible? Ethan couldn't begin to comprehend what he was witnessing, but the effect was undeniable. The aircraft's systems appeared to be malfunctioning, its lights flickering in the same manner as the stations had, when Ocean interfaced with the control panel. Her song intensified, the incomprehensible melody rising in both volume and complexity. The water beneath their vessel began to churn, not with natural currents, but with deliberate motion, as though responding directly to Ocean's will. A surge lifted their small craft, propelling them forward with speed far beyond the skiff's engineered capabilities. Behind them, the aircraft's lights failed completely. It hung suspended for a brief moment, then began a controlled but clearly unintended descent toward the water's surface. Ocean's song concluded with a series of notes that seemed to penetrate directly into Ethan's consciousness, leaving impressions not of sound, but of meaning, danger, escape, sanctuary. As the final tone faded, she lowered her arms and turned to him, those luminous eyes gradually returning to their former silver state. That was... Ethan struggled to find words adequate to what he'd witnessed. How did you do that? Ocean tilted her head, considering him with an expression both ancient and innocent. She touched her throat, then gestured to the water surrounding them, then placed her hand over her heart. It's part of you, Ethan interpreted. The water, the sound, they're connected to what you are. A nod, solemn and somehow sad. And those men, the ones hunting you, they know about this ability? Another nod, this one accompanied by a shudder that had nothing to do with the night air. Ethan processed this new understanding. Ocean wasn't merely an extraterrestrial being who had escaped confinement. She possessed abilities that defied human science, powers that connected to fundamental forces in ways he couldn't comprehend. No wonder the agents pursued her with such determination. No wonder she had been kept collared and caged. We need to find somewhere safe, he said, returning his attention to navigating their suddenly much faster vessel. Somewhere they won't look immediately. Ocean pointed toward the shore, but not toward the island that housed Helios 9. Instead, she indicated the distant mainland, a journey of nearly 30 kilometers across open ocean, far beyond the intended range of their small craft. That's too far, Ethan objected. We don't have enough power. Ocean's expression remained resolute. She gestured again to the mainland, then to herself, then to the water. The message was clear. She could help them cross. Like you just did, Ethan asked. You can propel us that far? Ocean shook her head slightly, making a motion with her hands that suggested a different approach. She pointed to herself, then to the water, making a diving motion. You want to go into the water? Ethan frowned. But how would that... Before he could complete the question, Ocean moved to the side of the skiff. With one last glance at Ethan, those silver eyes communicating both reassurance and determination, she slipped over the edge and into the dark waters. Ethan lunged toward where she had disappeared, panic rising in his throat. Ocean! For several seconds, nothing happened. The skiff drifted on the gentle swells, its motor idling. Ethan scanned the water desperately, searching for any sign of her. Then, without warning, the vessel lurched forward, accelerating so suddenly that Ethan nearly lost his balance. Gripping the side, he stared in astonishment at what was happening. The water directly ahead of the skiff was glowing with that same blue luminescence he'd seen when Ocean interfaced with the control panel. And just visible beneath the surface, a silver form moved with impossible speed, pulling the small craft in its wake. Ocean was towing them through the water, somehow creating a current or force that propelled the skiff forward at a speed no human swimmer could approach. As Ethan watched, bioluminescent organisms gathered around her, creating a pathway of light that stretched ahead like a runway guiding their journey. All he could do was hold on and stare in wonder as they raced across the dark water, leaving Helios 9 and its hunters far behind. The journey to the mainland passed in a blur of starlight, reflected on water, and the constant glow of Ocean's passage beneath the surface. Occasionally, she would emerge briefly, those silver eyes checking on Ethan before she returned to her aquatic propulsion. Each time, he marveled anew at her impossible abilities and the growing mystery of who and what she truly was. As they approached the coastline, the water's depth decreased, forcing Ocean to adjust her method. The glowing trail beneath the surface rose closer to their vessel, and their speed gradually diminished. When they were perhaps 100 meters from shore, Ocean surfaced completely, swimming alongside the skiff with powerful strokes that still exceeded human capability. Ethan guided the craft toward a secluded section of beach, away from the small fishing village visible further along the coast. As the skiff's hull ground against sand, he jumped out to pull it further ashore, securing it among a cluster of rocks where casual observation from the water would miss it. Ocean emerged from the shallows, water streaming from her silver form. In the moonlight, she appeared almost ethereal, a being composed more of light than solid matter. The filaments on her head clung close now, heavy with moisture, giving her a sleeker appearance. Those remarkable eyes found Ethan's in the darkness, conveying a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment. "That was incredible," Ethan said quietly, extending a hand to help her up the beach. "I've never seen anything like it." Ocean accepted his assistance with a slight nod, though her movements remained graceful, despite obvious fatigue. Once on dry sand, she looked back toward the horizon where, just visible, the lights of Helios 9 glimmered like distant stars fallen to earth. "They'll be looking for us," Ethan acknowledged, following her gaze. "But they'll search the island first. We have some time." Ocean nodded again, then looked around at their surroundings with evident curiosity. The mainland was largely uninhabited in this region, a protected wilderness area with dense forests beginning just beyond the beach. In the distance, mountains rose against the night sky, their peaks lost in clouds. "We need shelter," Ethan decided, gathering what few supplies they'd managed to bring from the skiff. "And you need rest." They moved away from the shore, entering the forest's edge, where old-growth trees created a cathedral of shadows. Ethan used his tablet's light to navigate, searching for anything that might serve as temporary refuge. After perhaps 20 minutes of careful progress, they discovered what they needed: a rock formation creating a shallow cave, its entrance partially concealed by hanging vines. "This will work for tonight," Ethan said, examining the space. Dry, hidden, and no signs of animal habitation. He quickly established a minimal camp. Thermal blankets from the emergency kit spread on the stone floor, portable light set to its lowest setting, water and ration packs arranged for easy access. Ocean watched these preparations with attentive interest, those silver eyes taking in every detail of his movements. When Ethan finally sat down, fatigue washing over him in a sudden wave, Ocean settled nearby. For several minutes, they simply existed in shared silence, the events of the past 24 hours seeming almost dreamlike in their improbability. "I still don't understand," Ethan said finally. "What are you? Why were you in that pool? What did those men want with you?" Ocean regarded him steadily, frustration briefly crossing her features at her inability to explain in words he would understand. Then, with deliberate movements, she reached toward him, those delicate silver fingers extended. Ethan hesitated only a moment before nodding permission. Ocean's hand came to rest against his temple, her touch surprisingly warm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then images began to flood his mind, not as speech or conventional communication, but as direct sensory impressions so vivid they momentarily obliterated his awareness of the cave around them. He saw, felt, experienced a vast ocean unlike any on Earth, its waters dense with minerals that gave it a luminous quality, where beings like Ocean moved in complex social structures, communicating through song and bioluminescence. A catastrophe of unimaginable scale, not water receding but transforming, becoming hostile to life as pressure and temperature changes caused by multiple stellar events rendered an entire planet uninhabitable. The desperate flight of survivors, their consciousness partially preserved in crystalline structures that could bridge vast distances through methods beyond human comprehension. Arrival on Earth, where the deep oceans initially provided sanctuary, until human detection led to capture, study, experimentation. Ocean herself, not a child as Ethan had assumed, but a vessel containing multiple preserved consciousnesses of her kind, a living repository of an entire civilization's knowledge and essence. The collar, designed not merely to track, but to suppress abilities that human science classified as impossible. Abilities connected to molecular manipulation of water and the bioelectric fields that permeated all living things. The connection broke as Ocean withdrew her hand, those silver eyes watching Ethan with something between hope and apprehension. She had shared what words could not convey, but would he understand? Would he fear her now? Ethan sat in stunned silence, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what he'd glimpsed. Not all of it had been comprehensible. Concepts existed in her consciousness that had no human equivalent. Structures of thought that transcended his neurological framework. But the essential truth was clear. Ocean was the last of her kind. A survivor carrying the collective memory and essence of a civilization lost to cosmic disaster. And humans, specifically the Shadow Unit agents, had recognized her value not as a sentient being deserving of dignity, but as a source of biological technology far beyond Earth's development. "They wanted to study you," Ethan said quietly. "To take apart what makes you unique and use it for their own purposes." Ocean nodded solemnly. "And there are more of you? Other survivors?" A complex expression crossed her features, neither clear affirmation nor denial. She held up her hand, fingers splayed, then slowly closed them into a fist, leaving only one finger extended. "5 at first," Ethan interpreted. "Now only you." Another nod, accompanied by that luminous tearing he'd seen before. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, the words hopelessly inadequate against the scale of loss they addressed. "But why were you in that pool? Were you trying to escape?" Ocean shook her head. She made a gesture mimicking sleep, then pointed to herself, then upward toward the stars. "You were in some kind of suspension," Ethan guessed, "and something woke you." She nodded, then pointed more specifically toward a particular section of the night sky, visible through the cave entrance. "A signal," Ethan frowned. "From home? But you showed me it was destroyed." Ocean's expression conveyed both confirmation and correction. She touched her chest, where a human heart would be, then gestured to the stars again. "Not your original home," Ethan realized. "A new one. Somewhere your people established before the disaster." An emphatic nod, those silver eyes brightening with what might have been hope. "And you need to reach it. That's why you woke up, why you were trying to escape." Ocean confirmed this with another nod, then reached toward him again, this time taking his hand in both of hers. The gesture conveyed gratitude beyond words, acknowledgement that without his intervention, she would have remained captive, perhaps forever lost to her kind. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "I'll help you," he promised. "Somehow, we'll find a way to get you where you need to go." As Ocean's silver eyes held his, Ethan felt the weight of that promise settle over him. He had no idea how to fulfill it, how to help an extraterrestrial being reach a destination somewhere in the stars, especially while evading pursuit from agents with resources far beyond his own. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Ocean was no longer alone in her impossible journey. "Rest now," he said, releasing her hand. "Tomorrow we'll figure out our next steps." Ocean settled onto the thermal blankets, those remarkable eyes closing with evident exhaustion. Within minutes, her breathing had settled into the rhythm of deep sleep, the filaments on her head moving gently as though stirred by invisible currents. Ethan remained awake longer, his mind processing all he had learned, all he had witnessed. His life had irreversibly changed in less than a day, transformed from the predictable routine of a station technician to the guardian of perhaps the most remarkable being on Earth. The responsibility should have terrified him, but instead, he felt a strange sense of purpose that had been absent for longer than he cared to remember. Eventually, fatigue claimed him as well, and he drifted into sleep beside the silver child from the stars, while outside, their hidden shelter. The first light of dawn began to illuminate the forest. They remained in the cave for 3 days, venturing out only when necessary to gather water or scout the immediate area. On the second day, they spotted an aircraft similar to the one that had pursued them from Helios 9, flying in systematic patterns over the coastline. Ocean had immediately retreated deeper into the cave, those silver eyes wide with fear, and Ethan had spent hours reassuring her that their hiding place remained secure. During this time of forced inactivity, Ethan learned more about Ocean through their developing system of communication. Her ability to transmit direct impressions, what he came to think of as memory sharing, remained limited to brief exchanges that left her visibly drained. Instead, they relied on an expanding vocabulary of gestures, drawings, and the few human words Ocean began to vocalize with increasing accuracy. "Ethan," she would say, the sound slightly otherworldly coming from her throat, which was not designed for human speech. "Friend." Each successful communication brought a glow of accomplishment to those silver eyes, a reminder that despite her ancient consciousness and remarkable abilities, she was still learning, still adapting to a world not her own. On the third night, Ocean led Ethan back to the beach after darkness had fully descended. The moon was waning now, providing less illumination, which Ocean indicated was preferable for what she intended to show him. At the water's edge, she knelt, placing both hands upon the surface. Immediately, the area around her touch began to glow with that now familiar blue luminescence. But this time, instead of propelling them or interfacing with technology, the light began to form patterns, symbols similar to writing but with a fluid, dynamic quality, unlike any human script. "Your language," Ethan guessed, crouching beside her to observe more closely. Ocean nodded, continuing to create symbols that hung suspended in the water, glowing with inner light. As the patterns expanded, they began to form what Ethan recognized as a map, not of terrestrial geography, but of star systems and cosmic bodies. At the center of this luminous cartography, Ocean created a symbol more elaborate than the others, a complex arrangement that pulsed with particular brightness. She pointed to it, then to herself, her meaning clear: destination. "That's where you need to go," Ethan said. "But it's not in our solar system, is it?" Ocean shook her head, gesturing expansively to indicate great distance. "How were you planning to get there?" Ethan asked, the practical impossibility of the journey suddenly overwhelming. "Earth doesn't have technology capable of reaching other star systems. At least, not within a human lifetime." Ocean's expression conveyed both acknowledgement of this limitation and a solution he couldn't yet grasp. She drew another symbol in the glowing water, this one resembling a curved pathway connecting two distant points. "A shortcut," Ethan frowned. "Some kind of wormhole? Spatial folding?" Ocean tilted her head, considering these terms, then nodded with qualification. "Not exactly, but close enough for his understanding." "And you can create this pathway?" Another qualified nod. She pointed to herself, then to the stars, then made a gesture that suggested incompletion or insufficient capacity. "You need something else," Ethan interpreted. "Something to amplify or complete your ability." Ocean confirmed this with a more definite nod. She erased the glowing map with a sweep of her hand, then created a new image. A vessel of some kind. Its design unlike any human spacecraft Ethan had ever seen. Its form was more organic than mechanical, with elements that suggested biological integration rather than constructed components. "Is this what you need to find?" Ethan asked, studying the strange design. "A ship of your people's making?" Ocean nodded, adding details to the image that indicated scale. The vessel was relatively small, perhaps the size of a shuttle rather than a large spacecraft. She then added another symbol beside it, one that pulsed with particular urgency. "And this symbol means?" Ocean pointed upward, then made a circular motion with her finger. "It's in orbit," Ethan guessed. "Around Earth?" An emphatic nod, accompanied by the first full smile he'd seen from her, an expression of such hope that it transformed her alien features into something unexpectedly beautiful. "You're saying there's a ship," Ethan clarified. "One of your people's vessels, already in orbit around Earth. And if we can reach it, you can use it to create this pathway home." Ocean nodded again, her silver eyes shining with an intensity that transcended language barriers. She reached for his hand, initiating another brief memory share that conveyed what words could not. The vessel had been placed in dormant orbit decades ago, a lifeboat of sorts, containing technology that could harness her innate abilities to create a space-folding corridor back to her people's new home. When the connection broke, Ethan sat back on his heels, mind reeling with implications. "So, that's why you were trying to escape. You received some kind of activation signal from the orbiting vessel, waking you from suspension." Ocean confirmed this with a nod, adding a gesture that suggested urgency, a window of opportunity that would not remain open indefinitely. "And the agents, the hunters, do they know about this ship?" Ocean's expression darkened. She shook her head, then qualified the response with a gesture of uncertainty. They might not know specifically about the vessel, but they certainly knew she possessed knowledge and abilities beyond what they had documented. Ethan stared out at the dark ocean, processing this new information. Getting Ocean off-world seemed an impossible task, even more impossible than their escape from Helios 9 had been. Earth's limited launch facilities were heavily monitored and restricted. No conventional rocket would be accessible to them. "We need a plan," he said finally, "and more information. We need to know exactly where this vessel is in orbit, and we need to find some way to reach it." Ocean dispersed the glowing images with another sweep of her hand, the bioluminescent water returning to its natural state. She looked at Ethan expectantly, those silver eyes conveying complete trust in his ability to solve this seemingly insurmountable problem. That trust was both touching and terrifying. Ethan was a station technician, not an astronaut or aerospace engineer. His knowledge of orbital mechanics was basic at best, and his access to launch capabilities non-existent. And yet, there might be a way, he said slowly, an idea beginning to form. Not easy, and definitely not safe, but possible. Ocean tilted her head questioningly. "There's an old launch facility about 300 kilometers north of here," Ethan explained. "It was abandoned when the sea levels rose 15 years ago, but some of the infrastructure might still be intact. More importantly, it housed a prototype shuttle program that never went into full production. Smaller craft designed for rapid deployment of satellites." Ocean listened intently, those silver eyes never leaving his face. "If any of those prototypes remain," Ethan continued, thinking aloud, "and if they can be made operational, it's a lot of ifs, but it might be our only option." The Silver Child considered this, then nodded decisively. She pointed north, then to herself and Ethan, her meaning clear. "Let's go." "It won't be easy," Ethan cautioned. 300 kilometers through territory we don't know, while being hunted, and even if we reach the facility, there's no guarantee we'll find what we need." Ocean's expression remained resolute. She gestured again toward the stars, then to her chest, conveying that any risk was acceptable given what was at stake, not just her own fate, but the preserved consciousness of her entire species. Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her determination. "We'll leave at first light, for now. We should return to the cave and gather what supplies we have." As they made their way back through the darkened forest, Ethan's mind raced with preparations and contingencies. The journey ahead would test them in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But the alternative, allowing Ocean to be recaptured, to remain forever separated from her kind, was unthinkable. By dawn, they had assembled their meager resources, the emergency supplies from the skiff, a crude map Ethan had drawn based on his knowledge of the region, and a determination that would have to compensate for their many disadvantages. They set out as the first light of morning filtered through the forest canopy, moving northward along animal trails that provided both concealment and relatively easy passage. Ocean moved with surprising endurance for her size, her alien physiology apparently well adapted to the terrain. When they encountered streams or small bodies of water, she would pause briefly to immerse her hands, the contact seeming to rejuvenate her in some fundamental way. By midday, they had covered nearly 20 kilometers. Impressive progress, but a small fraction of the journey ahead. They paused in a small clearing to rest and consume some of their dwindling rations. As Ocean sipped water from a clear stream, Ethan reviewed their route on his crude map. "If we maintain this pace," he calculated, "we could reach the launch facility in about 2 weeks. But our supplies won't last that long." Ocean looked up from the stream, those silver eyes thoughtful. She pointed to the forest around them, then mimicked gathering or collecting. "You think we can find food along the way?" Ethan asked. "I don't know much about foraging, but I suppose we could try." Ocean shook her head slightly, clarifying her meaning with a gesture toward herself, then to the stream, then making a motion like drawing something toward her. "You can attract food from the water?" She nodded, demonstrating by placing her hands just above the stream's surface. As Ethan watched, the water beneath her palms began to glow with that now familiar blue luminescence. After several seconds, small fish began to gather in the illuminated area, drawn to the light or perhaps to some frequency Ethan couldn't perceive. With a swift movement, Ocean captured one of the larger fish, holding it gently as it struggled briefly before becoming still. Not dead, Ethan realized, but calm, as though pacified by her touch. "That's useful," he acknowledged, impressed despite the strangeness of the demonstration. "But what about you? Do you eat fish?" Ocean considered the question, then made a gesture suggesting partial affirmation. She could consume earth proteins if necessary, though they weren't optimal for her biology. Water, however, was her primary sustenance, particularly water with high mineral content. "So we focus on finding water sources for you, fish, and foraged plants for me," Ethan summarized. "That should extend our supplies significantly." They continued northward, their progress slowed by the need to remain vigilant for signs of pursuit. Twice they spotted aircraft in the distance, whether belonging to the agents or simply routine traffic. They couldn't determine, but each sighting drove them deeper into the forest's cover. As dusk approached, they found shelter in a hollow beneath the massive roots of an ancient tree. There, by the light of Ethan's tablet screen, they reviewed their day's journey and planned for the next, using a stick. Ocean drew a more detailed map in the soft earth, not of their terrestrial route, but of the sky above them, marking the orbital path of the vessel they sought. "It's in a high Earth orbit," Ethan observed, recognizing the pattern she described. "That's good. It means it's stable, not likely to decay anytime soon. But it also means we'll need more fuel to reach it." Ocean indicated understanding, adding details to her drawing that suggested the vessel had autonomous capabilities, It could adjust its orbit if necessary, perhaps even descend to a lower altitude to facilitate rendezvous. "Can you communicate with it?" Ethan asked. "Let it know we're coming?" Ocean's expression turned pensive. She made a gesture suggesting partial ability. Some form of basic signaling might be possible under specific conditions, but not reliable communication across the current distance. "We'll figure it out when we get closer to the launch facility," Ethan decided. "For now, we should rest." They settled into their makeshift shelter, sharing the thermal blankets for warmth as the forest night grew cool around them. Ethan found himself studying Ocean as she drifted toward sleep, still marveling at the impossible series of events that had brought them together. In the dim light, with the filaments on her head moving gently in some unseen current, she appeared both utterly alien and strangely familiar, a paradox of otherness and connection. Just as he was about to close his own eyes, Ocean stirred, those silver orbs opening to regard him with sudden alertness. She sat up, head tilted in that now familiar listening posture. Then, with urgent gestures, she indicated they needed to move immediately. Ethan didn't question the warning. In the short time they'd been together, he'd learned to trust Ocean's heightened senses. They gathered their few belongings silently and slipped out of their shelter into the forest darkness. They hadn't gone 50 meters when Ethan heard what Ocean had detected earlier, the distinctive whir of a drone's propellers, moving through the forest with systematic precision. A search pattern. "They've tracked us," Ethan whispered, pulling Ocean deeper into the shadows of a dense thicket. "But how?" "Your collar is gone." Ocean's silver eyes reflected moonlight as she pointed to the skiff they'd abandoned on the beach, then to her own footprints, making a connecting gesture between them. "They found the boat and followed our trail." Ethan realized. Old-fashioned tracking. The drone's sound grew closer, its sensors undoubtedly designed to detect heat signatures and movement. They couldn't outrun it, and with the density of the forest canopy, they couldn't hope to hide from its thermal imaging for long. Ocean tugged at Ethan's sleeve, pointing urgently toward a small ravine where a stream cut through the forest floor. He understood immediately. Water might mask their heat signatures temporarily. They moved as silently as possible toward the ravine, the drone's searching pattern drawing ever nearer. Just as they reached the water's edge, a beam of light cut through the darkness behind them. The drone had spotted their movement and was now actively pursuing. Without hesitation, Ocean pulled Ethan into the stream, the cold water shocking against his skin. She guided him downstream, moving with surprising speed against the current. Behind them, the drone hovered at the spot where they'd entered the water, its sensors apparently confused by their sudden disappearance. They continued along the stream for several hundred meters before Ocean guided them onto a rocky bank where they would leave minimal tracks. The drone's lights were still visible in the distance, now joined by others as the search expanded. "They're going to blanket the whole area," Ethan realized grimly. "We need to find better cover." Ocean nodded, pointing to the ridge of hills visible in the moonlight ahead of them. She made a gesture suggesting caves or tunnels, underground shelter where heat signatures would be harder to detect. They moved with renewed urgency, the sound of drones growing more distant as they put the stream between themselves and the search party. The climb up the hillside was arduous, particularly in wet clothing, but the promise of safety drove them forward. Near the summit, Ocean suddenly stopped, her attention drawn to a shadow among the rocks that Ethan had overlooked. It was the entrance to a small cave, barely visible in the darkness, but offering exactly the shelter they sought. Inside, the space opened up more than its entrance suggested, a natural chamber, perhaps 10 meters deep, with a ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. Most importantly, the thick rock would shield them from thermal detection. "Good find," Ethan whispered, sinking down against the cave wall in exhaustion. "We should be safe here until morning." Ocean moved deeper into the cave, those silver eyes apparently able to see in near total darkness. After a moment of exploration, she returned to Ethan's side, her expression conveying a discovery of significance. "What is it?" he asked, following as she led him toward the rear of the cave. There, barely visible in the dim light filtering from the entrance, was evidence of previous human presence. Not recent, but still recognizable. Old equipment cases, the remnants of what might have been monitoring devices, and most surprisingly, a metal door set into the rock wall. Some kind of research outpost? Ethan wondered aloud, examining the door. It was secured with a simple mechanical lock, rather than electronic systems, technology that predated the more advanced security measures of current facilities. Ocean watched with interest as Ethan retrieved his multi-tool and began working on the lock. After several minutes of careful manipulation, the mechanism yielded with a rusty click. The door swung open to reveal a short corridor carved from the living rock, leading to a larger chamber beyond. Ethan activated the light on his tablet, illuminating what appeared to be an abandoned scientific station. Computers and equipment draped in protective covers, workstations arranged around a central area, and walls lined with storage containers. Geological survey station, maybe, Ethan guessed, examining the faded markings on some of the containers. Probably abandoned during the coastal evacuations. Ocean moved through the space with evident curiosity, those silver eyes taking in every detail. She approached one of the covered computers, her head tilted in that questioning posture Ethan had come to recognize. "Worth a try," he agreed, understanding her unspoken suggestion. He uncovered the nearest terminal and examined its power connections. To his surprise, the system appeared to be connected to a still functional solar array. The station had been designed for long-term autonomous operation. After several attempts, the computer activated, its displays flickering to life with the hesitancy of long-dormant technology. The system was password-protected, but Ethan's technical skills proved adequate to bypass the security measures, especially given their outdated nature. "Let's see what we've got," he murmured, navigating through file directories. Geographical surveys, seismic monitoring, atmospheric composition. Wait. A subfolder labeled Orbital Tracking caught his attention. Opening it revealed a database of satellite trajectories and space debris monitoring. Apparently, the station had served a dual purpose, tracking both terrestrial and extraterrestrial phenomena. "This could be useful," Ethan said, excitement building. "If the data is still being updated via automated systems, we might be able to locate your vessel." Ocean leaned closer, those silver eyes fixed on the screen with intense focus. As Ethan navigated through the tracking system, she suddenly placed her hand on the display, stopping his scrolling at a particular entry. Unidentified Object 2173b. The object's parameters were unusual, an orbit higher than most satellites, but remarkably stable for an uncontrolled object. Most telling was the notation: composition unknown, non-standard materials, possible extraterrestrial origin. "That's it," Ethan breathed. "That's your ship." Ocean's expression confirmed his conclusion, those silver eyes shining with renewed hope. She touched the screen again, tracing the object's orbital path with a delicate finger. Ethan began downloading the data to his tablet, along with any other information that might prove useful for their journey. As the transfer progressed, he explored the rest of the station, discovering supplies that significantly improved their situation, preserved food, medical equipment, even clothing that, while designed for previous occupants, could be adapted to their needs. Most valuable was a detailed map of the region, including transportation routes and settlements. With this, they could plan a more efficient path to the launch facility, potentially cutting days from their journey. By the time dawn arrived, they had transformed their desperate flight into something approaching a viable plan. They would follow the ridgeline northward, using the higher elevation to spot potential pursuit, while avoiding populated areas. The map showed a railway line approximately 40 kilometers ahead that could potentially accelerate their journey if they could safely board a cargo transport. "We should rest a few more hours," Ethan suggested, having established a comfortable space within the abandoned station. "Then, continue north when the search drones are likely to be recharging." Ocean nodded agreement, though her attention remained fixed on the orbital tracking display, where a small dot represented the vessel that was both her past and her hoped-for future. As she finally settled onto an improvised bed, those silver eyes meeting Ethan's, with a gaze that conveyed both gratitude and determination. He was struck by the realization that their implausible partnership had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated, a shared purpose that transcended the vast differences between their species and origins. "We'll get you home," he promised quietly, not certain if she was still awake to hear him. "Whatever it takes." The next phase of their journey proved more challenging than anticipated. While the abandoned research station had provided valuable resources and information, leaving its shelter meant returning to the constant vigilance of fugitives. The agents had expanded their search, with drones now patrolling in coordinated patterns that forced Ethan and Ocean to travel primarily at night and seek cover during daylight hours. Their progress was slow but steady, averaging 15 to 20 kilometers each night before finding shelter as dawn approached. Ocean's extraordinary senses repeatedly proved invaluable, detecting approaching drones or ground patrols long before Ethan could perceive them. On the fourth night after leaving the research station, they reached the railway line identified on their map, concealed in the underbrush beside the tracks. They waited for an opportunity, preferably a slower-moving cargo transport heading northward. "According to the schedule I downloaded, there should be a materials transport passing through around midnight," Ethan whispered, checking his tablet for the 100th time. "It slows considerably on the uphill grade about 2 kilometers ahead. That's our best chance to board." Ocean nodded, those silver eyes scanning the darkness with their uncanny perception. She had adapted remarkably well to their fugitive existence, learning to move silently through different terrains and to communicate her observations with increasingly precise gestures. Occasionally, she would attempt human speech, single words or simple phrases that emerged with that slightly otherworldly quality from her differently structured vocal apparatus. "Train, coming," she said now, pointing southward along the tracks. Ethan strained his ears but heard nothing. "You're sure?" Ocean nodded emphatically. Several minutes passed before Ethan finally detected what she had sensed much earlier, the distant rumble of an approaching transport. They moved quickly to the position they'd selected earlier, where a curve in the track would force the train to reduce speed. As the transport appeared, a long chain of cargo containers pulled by an automated engine, they could see it was indeed decelerating for the grade ahead. "Remember the plan," Ethan said unnecessarily. "Wait for my signal, then run alongside the third container from the end. I'll help you up first, then follow." Ocean indicated understanding, her slight form tense with anticipation. As the train reached their position, its speed now reduced to perhaps 30 kilometers per hour. Ethan gave the signal. They burst from cover, running parallel to the massive vehicle, the ground vibrating beneath their feet from its passage. The third container from the end approached, one they'd selected because the manifest suggested it was only partially filled, providing space for stowaways. Ethan boosted Ocean upward toward the access ladder on the container's side. She caught it with remarkable agility, climbing quickly to the roof access hatch. Ethan followed, his greater weight making the climb more difficult as the train began to accelerate again on the leveling track. Ocean reached down, those slender silver fingers grasping his wrist with surprising strength, helping pull him onto the container's roof, just as the train's speed made further climbing impossible. They lay flat against the metal surface, breathing hard from the exertion and the rush of adrenaline. Above them, stars wheeled in the clear night sky, including, somewhere among them, the vessel they sought. after ensuring they weren't visible from ground level. Ethan examined the roof access hatch. It was secured with a simple mechanical lock, similar to the one he'd defeated at the research station. Within minutes, they had descended into the container's dim interior. As expected, the space was only partially filled with crated materials, mining equipment, according to the labeling. The arrangement left ample room at one end for them to establish a relatively comfortable temporary shelter among the crates. According to the manifest, this transport is headed all the way to the Northern Territories, Ethan explained as they settled in. That's about 80 kilometers past our destination, but it should get us within a day's walk of the launch facility. Ocean nodded, those silver eyes reflecting the dim light filtering through seams in the container. She pointed questioningly to the crates surrounding them. Mining equipment, Ethan confirmed. Probably for the restoration projects in the northern mountains. Nothing useful for us, I'm afraid. They had been traveling in the container for approximately 6 hours, the rhythmic movement of the train lulling them into a sense of relative security, when Ocean suddenly stiffened. Her head tilted in that now familiar listening posture, the filaments atop her head standing rigid with alarm. "What is it?" Ethan whispered, immediately alert. Ocean pointed upward, then made a circular motion with her finger, the gesture she used to indicate drones or aircraft. Ethan strained to hear over the train's noise but detected nothing unusual. Nevertheless, he had learned to trust Ocean's senses implicitly. They quickly gathered their belongings, preparing for potential flight. Minutes later, even Ethan's human hearing caught what had alarmed Ocean, the distinctive whine of aerial drones, moving parallel to the train's path. The sound grew louder, suggesting the drones were now directly overhead, tracking the transport's movement. "Could be routine security," Ethan whispered hopefully. "This region has had issues with cargo theft." Ocean's skeptical expression suggested she considered this unlikely. She pointed to herself, then to the roof, making a gesture that mimicked scanning or searching. "You think they're specifically looking for us? That they somehow knew we'd take the train?" She nodded grimly, those silver eyes conveying certainty. "Then we need to get off before they search the containers," Ethan decided, checking their location on his tablet's map. "We're about 40 kilometers from the launch facility. Not ideal, but close enough to proceed on foot if necessary." The train was moving at nearly full speed now, making disembarkation dangerous. They would need to wait for another slowing section, or a scheduled stop. According to the transport schedule, neither would occur for another 100 kilometers, too far. If Ocean's instincts about the searching drones were correct. "Options?" Ethan muttered, more to himself than to Ocean. The Silver Child considered for a moment, then approached the side wall of the container. She placed her palms against the metal surface, and that now familiar blue luminescence began to spread from her touch, not bright enough to be visible from outside, but creating an eerie glow within their enclosed space. The metal beneath her hands began to change, not melting exactly, but becoming temporarily more malleable, as though its molecular structure was being temporarily altered. With careful movements, Ocean shaped a small section of the wall, creating what appeared to be a rudimentary handhold. She looked at Ethan expectantly, then gestured to the opposite wall, making a climbing motion followed by a jumping gesture. "You want to create handholds so we can climb out and jump from the moving train?" Ethan interpreted, alarmed by the danger this presented. "That's extremely risky at this speed." Ocean nodded acknowledgement of the danger, but pointed urgently to the roof, where the drone sounds were now directly overhead. She made the scanning gesture again, followed by a motion that suggested containment or capture. "You're saying we don't have a choice?" Ethan realized. "They're going to find us if we stay." Another nod, this one solemn but determined. "All right," Ethan agreed reluctantly. "But we need to find the safest possible location to jump, preferably near water or soft ground, and definitely not near any settlements where we might be spotted." He consulted the map on his tablet. searching for optimal terrain along their current route. Approximately 3 kilometers ahead, the tracks crossed a river via a low bridge. The water below would provide a safer landing than hard ground, assuming they could time their jump correctly. There, Ethan decided, showing Ocean the location. We aim for the river. The fall isn't too great, and the water should break our landing. Ocean studied the map, then nodded agreement. She returned to the container wall, continuing to create a series of handholds that would allow them to climb to the roof and then descend the exterior to a position from which they could jump. The drone sounds intensified overhead, now accompanied by a new noise, the whir of scanning equipment being deployed. They were running out of time. "Let's go," Ethan urged, securing their few possessions in the waterproof pack from the research station. Ocean finished creating the final handhold, then gestured for Ethan to lead the way. He climbed the interior wall, using the altered metal grips, pushing open the roof hatch they'd left unlocked. The night air rushed in, along with the much louder sound of drones now hovering directly above the train. Ethan emerged onto the roof, immediately flattening himself to avoid detection. Ocean followed with that same fluid grace, her silver form almost invisible against the dark metal in the moonless night. They crawled toward the side of the container, where Ocean quickly created more handholds in the exterior wall. The river crossing was approaching, perhaps 1 kilometer ahead now, visible as a dark line cutting across the landscape. With painful slowness, they descended the side of the moving container, the wind from the train's passage threatening to tear them from their precarious holds. Above, the drones had begun systematic scanning of each container, working methodically from the front of the train toward their position. They reached the bottom edge of the container, now hanging from the final handholds with the tracks blurring beneath them at alarming speed. The river was visible ahead, perhaps 200 meters now. "Wait for my signal," Ethan called over the rushing wind and mechanical noise. "We jump together on 3, aiming for the deepest part of the river." Ocean nodded, those silver eyes reflecting starlight with an almost ethereal quality. The bridge approached rapidly. 100 meters, 50, 20. 1, 2, 3. They released their holds simultaneously, pushing away from the train with all their strength to clear the bridge structure. For a heart-stopping moment, Ethan felt nothing but air around him, the ground and water rushing up with terrifying speed. Then impact, the shock of cold water enveloping him, driving the air from his lungs. The current immediately seized him, carrying him downstream away from the bridge and the train that continued its journey, unaware of its departed passengers. Ethan fought to the surface, gasping for air and immediately searching for Ocean. To his relief, her silver form appeared nearby, moving through the water with natural ease, her species' apparent affinity for aquatic environments evident in her fluid movements. They allowed the current to carry them several hundred meters downstream before Ocean guided them toward the shore, away from the train tracks and the drones that continued their search pattern above the departed transport. Dripping and exhausted, they collapsed on the riverbank, the adrenaline of their escape gradually subsiding. Above them, the drones eventually changed direction, apparently continuing to follow the train rather than expanding their search perimeter. "That was too close," Ethan gasped when he'd recovered enough breath to speak. "But we're now only about 35 kilometers from the launch facility." Ocean nodded, wringing water from the filaments atop her head with delicate movements of her silver fingers. Despite the danger and discomfort, there was an almost pleased expression in those remarkable eyes, a sense of accomplishment at their successful evasion. "We'll rest here until dawn," Ethan decided, checking their waterproof pack to ensure their supplies had survived the plunge. "Then continue north along the river where possible. It'll provide both a water source for you and potential escape route if needed." Ocean settled beside him on the riverbank, her silver form gradually drying in the night air. The filaments on her head had resumed their gentle, flowing movement, suggesting her overall well-being despite the stresses of their journey. As Ethan watched her gazing up at the stars, somewhere among which orbited the vessel that represented her only connection to her lost civilization, he was struck again by the extraordinary nature of their partnership. Two beings from entirely different worlds, united by circumstance and choice, now moving together toward an outcome neither could fully predict. "Almost there," he said softly, following her gaze upward. "Just a little further." Ocean turned those silver eyes toward him, and for a moment, they reflected not just starlight but a depth of understanding and connection that transcended the vast differences between their species. She reached out, touching his hand briefly with those delicate silver fingers, a gesture of gratitude and shared purpose that required no translation. Then she pointed northward, toward their destination, and nodded with quiet determination. The final stage of their journey awaited with the coming dawn. The final stretch to the abandoned launch facility proved more challenging than anticipated. Their river crossing had left them in terrain more sparsely forested than their previous route, offering less cover from both aerial surveillance and the harsh sun of late summer. They traveled primarily at dawn and dusk, seeking shelter during the brightest hours and the darkest night when drones equipped with thermal imaging would have the greatest advantage. Despite these precautions, they encountered two close calls with search parties, once nearly walking into a ground team setting up a perimeter, forcing them to spend 6 hours submerged in a murky pond with only reeds for cover, and later having to divert 10 kilometers eastward to avoid a checkpoint established on the only road leading directly to the facility. By the time the launch complex came into view on the afternoon of their third day after leaving the train, both were exhausted, their supplies nearly depleted. They observed the facility from the shelter of a ridgeline approximately 1 kilometer distant, using the tablet's camera function to zoom in on specific areas. "It looks abandoned, as expected," Ethan noted, studying the images. "No obvious security measures, though that doesn't mean there aren't automated systems still functioning." The complex sprawled across several square kilometers, a central launch pad surrounded by support buildings, storage facilities, and what appeared to be a partially collapsed hangar. Vegetation had reclaimed much of the site, with young trees growing between cracked concrete and vines covering many of the structures. "The question is whether any of the prototype shuttles remain," Ethan continued, scanning the visible areas. "And if they do, whether they can be made operational." Ocean pointed to the largest structure still standing, what appeared to be the main vehicle assembly building, its massive doors sealed, but largely intact despite years of abandonment. "Good thinking," Ethan agreed. "If any shuttles survived, they'd most likely be stored there." They waited until dusk before approaching the facility, using the lengthening shadows for cover as they moved across open ground toward the perimeter fence. Once formidable, the security barrier had deteriorated significantly. Entire sections had collapsed, while others leaned at precarious angles, creating gaps large enough to pass through without difficulty. The first buildings they encountered had been thoroughly stripped, empty rooms containing only the heaviest equipment, too difficult to salvage during the evacuation. Ethan wasn't surprised. When the rising sea levels had threatened the coastal regions, the government had prioritized recovering valuable technology before abandoning areas deemed unsustainable. "Let's head directly to the assembly building," Ethan suggested, after their third empty structure. "No point wasting time on these peripheral facilities." Ocean nodded agreement, those silver eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with alertness that never seemed to diminish, despite their exhaustion. As they moved deeper into the complex, the central buildings loomed larger, monuments to a more ambitious era of space exploration, now silent and decaying. The vehicle assembly building's main entrance was sealed with heavy security doors that remained functional despite years of exposure. Ethan examined the control panel, unsurprised to find it completely dead, The power systems had likely been among the first things decommissioned during evacuation. "We'll need to find another way in," he muttered, scanning the structure's exterior. Ocean was already moving, those silver eyes apparently detecting something Ethan had missed. She led him around the eastern side of the massive building, where a smaller service entrance had been partially concealed by encroaching vegetation. This door's security system was simpler, a mechanical lock rather than electronic, similar to those Ethan had defeated at the research station. Within minutes, they had gained access to the building's dim interior. Emergency lighting activated automatically as they entered, running on separate power cells designed to function for decades without maintenance. The pale blue illumination revealed a vast open space, the floor of which was dominated by maintenance bays and assembly areas. And there, in the central bay, was exactly what they had hoped to find. A prototype shuttle, smaller than traditional orbital vehicles, but larger than atmospheric craft, rested in a partially disassembled state. Its sleek form suggested advanced aerodynamics, while the unusual configuration of its propulsion system hinted at technology that had never entered full production. "There it is," Ethan breathed, approaching the craft with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Project Ascension, the rapid deployment system that got canceled when funding was redirected to the coastal barriers. Ocean moved alongside him, those silver eyes examining the shuttle with evident interest. She placed a hand against its hull, head tilted, as though listening to something beyond human perception. "The question is whether it can fly," Ethan continued, circling the vehicle and assessing its condition. "It's partially disassembled, likely stripped of key components before abandonment." Indeed, closer inspection revealed missing sections of the control systems, gaps in the propulsion array, and an empty space where the guidance computer should have been. It was, in essence, a shell, the fundamental structure intact but lacking many essential components. "This complicates things," Ethan acknowledged, disappointment threatening to overwhelm him. "We might be able to salvage parts from elsewhere in the facility, but full restoration would require specialized equipment and expertise beyond what we have available." Ocean continued her strange communion with the shuttle, moving systematically around its perimeter, with one hand maintaining contact with the hull. When she completed the circuit, she turned to Ethan, with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, neither disappointment nor satisfaction, but something more complex. She gestured for him to step back, then placed both hands against the shuttle's main access panel. As Ethan watched, that now familiar blue luminescence began to spread from her touch, flowing across the craft's surface like liquid light. "What are you doing?" he asked, fascinated despite his concerns. Ocean didn't respond, her concentration entirely focused on whatever process she was initiating. The glow intensified, spreading further across the shuttle's hull, seeping into gaps and flowing along what appeared to be circuit pathways beneath the outer plating. After several minutes of this mysterious interaction, Ocean stepped back, those silver eyes now turning to Ethan with unmistakable satisfaction. She gestured toward the shuttle, then made a motion suggesting activation or power. "You've restored it somehow?" Ethan asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Ocean qualified her response with a gesture indicating partiality, not complete restoration, but something significant had changed. She approached the main access hatch, which should have been inoperable without power, and placed her hand on the external control panel. The blue glow appeared briefly, and to Ethan's astonishment, the hatch slid partially open with a hydraulic hiss. "That's remarkable," he admitted, moving forward to examine what had changed. "But even with basic systems partially functional, we're still missing critical components for actual spaceflight." Ocean nodded understanding, but gestured for him to enter the shuttle. Inside, the cockpit showed signs of hasty disassembly, empty brackets where instruments should have been, disconnected wiring hanging from control panels, seats removed from their mountings. And yet, As Ocean moved through the space, touching various surfaces and leaving that subtle blue luminescence in her wake, systems began to respond. Displays flickered with partial functionality. Environmental controls hummed to life. Internal lighting activated in sections. "You're bypassing the missing components," Ethan realized, watching in growing amazement. "Creating connections where the original systems have been removed." Ocean confirmed this with a nod, continuing her methodical interaction with the shuttle's infrastructure. She wasn't restoring it to original specifications, Ethan understood, but rather adapting it, creating a hybrid of human technology and whatever capabilities her own biology allowed her to implement. Even so, Ethan noted, examining the partially functioning systems, "We're missing fuel, guidance systems, life support. The list of critical components is still substantial." Ocean paused in her work, turning to Ethan with an expression that suggested he was missing something important. She pointed to herself, then to the shuttle, then upward toward where her vessel orbited somewhere overhead. The gesture was followed by a circular motion connecting all three elements. "You're saying you can serve as some of these missing components?" Ethan interpreted slowly. "That your abilities can substitute for conventional systems?" An emphatic nod, accompanied by the most human-like expression he'd yet seen from her, something approaching excitement or enthusiasm. "Like you did with the skiff," Ethan continued, understanding dawning. "And the train container. You can interface directly with the shuttle's remaining systems, guiding it using your innate abilities, rather than mechanical controls." Ocean confirmed this with another nod, adding a gesture that suggested integration or connection. "It's still incredibly risky," Ethan cautioned, though hope was beginning to rebuild. "Even with your abilities, we'd be attempting spaceflight in a vehicle never designed for that purpose, with makeshift systems and minimal safety redundancies." Ocean's expression turned solemn. She pointed to the stars, visible through the cockpit's viewport, then to herself, making a gesture that conveyed absolute necessity. This wasn't a choice between safe and risky options. It was her only path home, regardless of the dangers involved. Ethan nodded slowly, accepting the reality of their situation. "All right. If you believe this can work, I'll help however I can. What do you need from me?" Over the next several hours, they established a plan for the improvised launch. Ocean would continue integrating herself with the shuttle systems, creating connections that would allow her to control its movement and life support functions. Ethan would search the facility for any remaining components that might supplement her abilities, particularly fuel cells, which even Ocean's remarkable powers couldn't fully substitute for the raw energy needed to escape Earth's gravity. The assembly building's storage areas yielded partial success. 2 auxiliary fuel cells that, while not designed specifically for the prototype shuttle, could be adapted to provide additional thrust during the critical initial stage of launch. Equally valuable was a relatively intact environmental system that might extend their limited life support capabilities during the ascent. By dawn, they had assembled a makeshift spacecraft that defied conventional engineering principles, but represented their best hope for reaching Ocean's orbiting vessel. The shuttle now pulsed with that ethereal blue luminescence throughout its systems, evidence of Ocean's deep integration with its functionality. "We should rest before attempting launch," Ethan suggested, exhaustion evident in his voice. "The reactivation of systems might have triggered automated alerts. If anyone is monitoring this facility, even remotely, they could be on their way." Ocean agreed, though she maintained contact with the shuttle even as they established a temporary resting place in what had once been the facility's control room. The connection appeared to be essential to the ongoing integration process, a living link between her consciousness and the hybrid systems they were creating. As Ethan settled into uneasy sleep, his mind cycling through the countless ways their desperate plan could fail, he found himself strangely calm despite the risks ahead. Whatever happened, They had come further than anyone could reasonably have expected. A station technician and an extraterrestrial fugitive, working together toward an impossible goal. His last thought before sleep claimed him was a simple one. Regardless of the outcome, he would not regret having helped Ocean in her journey home. The alarm that woke him came not from any external source, but from Ocean herself. A gentle touch on his shoulder and an urgent gesture toward the assembly building's external sensors, which she had apparently reactivated during his rest period. On the display, multiple heat signatures approached from the south, at least 3 vehicles moving at high speed toward the facility. The hunters had found them. "How long until they reach us?" Ethan asked, immediately alert despite his brief rest. Ocean indicated perhaps 20 minutes at their current speed. Not enough time for ideal preparation, but sufficient for their essential needs. She gestured toward the shuttle, then upward, making a launching motion. "You want to launch immediately?" Ethan confirmed. "Before they arrive?" She nodded emphatically, already moving toward the shuttle with that fluid grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. Ethan followed, mind racing through final preparations. "The building doors, they're sealed, and we haven't restored power to the main systems." Ocean pointed to herself, then to the massive doors that would need to open for the shuttle to exit. That same confident expression suggested she had already accounted for this challenge. They entered the shuttle, Ocean immediately connecting to its systems, with that now familiar blue luminescence flowing from her touch. The craft responded more comprehensively than before, displays activating fully, environmental systems humming to life, propulsion elements beginning their initialization sequence. "I'll secure the auxiliary fuel cells," Ethan said, moving to complete this critical task, while Ocean prepared the primary systems. The external display showed their pursuers growing closer, perhaps 15 minutes now until arrival. They would need to be airborne before then, or risk being trapped within the facility. With the fuel cells secured and all systems showing as ready as they would ever be, Ethan took the co-pilot's position beside Ocean. The conventional controls were largely non-functional, but Ocean had created alternative interfaces where necessary, touch surfaces imbued with that same blue energy that responded to Ethan's input when directed. "Launch sequence?" he asked, preparing for whatever unorthodox procedure would replace the standard protocols. Ocean extended both hands toward the primary control surfaces, the blue glow intensifying as she established deeper connection with the shuttle's integrated systems. The craft hummed with increasing energy, its hybrid propulsion elements warming toward activation thresholds. Simultaneously, that same energy extended outward from the shuttle, reaching toward the assembly building's massive doors. The ancient mechanisms groaned in protest, but began to move, sliding ponderously apart to reveal the dawn sky beyond. 10 minutes until they reached the perimeter, Ethan noted, monitoring the approaching vehicles. "We need to be airborne in 5. Ocean acknowledged this with a nod, her concentration never wavering from the complex integration she was maintaining. The shuttle's systems continued their activation sequence, bypass pathways glowing with that otherworldly light where conventional connections had been missing. The building doors reached their fully open position just as the shuttle's propulsion systems indicated readiness. With a gesture that somehow combined mechanical operation with something more organic, Ocean initiated launch procedures. The shuttle lifted from its maintenance cradle with surprising smoothness, hovering briefly before beginning its forward movement toward the open doors and the runway beyond. As they emerged into open air, Ethan caught sight of their pursuers on the facility's perimeter cameras, 3 black vehicles identical to those used by the agents at Helios 9, now less than 5 minutes from their position. "They've spotted us," he reported, noting the vehicle's sudden acceleration. "We need to gain altitude quickly." Ocean needed no translation of this urgency. The shuttle surged forward along the abandoned runway, gathering speed with remarkable efficiency given its improvised systems. As they reached the optimal velocity, she executed a perfect ascent angle, the craft lifting from the ground with a force that pressed Ethan back into his seat. Below, the pursuing vehicles converged on the runway, too late to prevent their departure but potentially still capable of activating whatever remote systems might remain to track or even disable their fleeing craft. "Check for tracking or pursuit capabilities," Ethan suggested, scanning the sensor readings Ocean had established. Her response was immediate, a surge of that blue energy throughout the shuttle systems, creating what appeared to be a disruption field, similar to what she had generated during their escape from Helios 9. Any tracking systems attempting to lock onto their position would encounter interference beyond their design parameters. They ascended rapidly through cloud layers, the prototype shuttle performing far beyond its original specifications thanks to Ocean's integration. The atmosphere thinned around them, the sky darkening toward the black of space as they pushed toward the upper limits of conventional flight. "Approaching maximum atmospheric altitude," Ethan reported, monitoring their position as best he could with the hybrid systems. "Transitioning to orbital insertion trajectory." This represented the most critical phase of their ascent, the point at which conventional aircraft would fail, unable to generate sufficient thrust in the thinning atmosphere. It was also the point at which their improvisations would face their greatest test. Ocean's expression remained one of intense concentration, the blue energy flowing through her and into the shuttle's systems pulsing with increased frequency. The auxiliary fuel cells Ethan had installed engaged simultaneously, providing the additional thrust needed for the final push beyond Earth's atmosphere. The craft shuddered as conflicting forces acted upon its frame, atmospheric drag diminishing, while gravitational pull remained substantial. For several heart-stopping moments, their ascent rate decreased, suggesting they might have reached their limit. Then, with a surge of energy that seemed to emanate directly from Ocean herself, the shuttle broke through the final atmospheric barrier. The vibration ceased abruptly, replaced by the eerie stillness of space. Through the viewport, Earth curved away beneath them, a blue-white crescent against the perfect black of the void. "We made it," Ethan breathed, scarcely believing what they had accomplished. "We're in space." Ocean's silver eyes opened fully for the first time since launch, taking in the view with what appeared to be a mixture of wonder and profound relief. The blue energy connecting her to the shuttle systems remained, but its intensity had diminished now that the most demanding phase of their journey was complete. "What's next?" Ethan asked, turning his attention to their ultimate objective. "How do we locate your vessel?" Ocean released one hand from the control interface, using it to gesture toward a particular section of the star field, visible through the viewport. With her free hand, she modified the shuttle sensor array, creating a detection system attuned to whatever unique signature her people's technology emitted. The display responded with a directional indicator, not precise coordinates, but a general vector along which the vessel apparently orbited. Ocean adjusted their trajectory accordingly, the shuttle responding with remarkable agility to her guidance. As they moved deeper into orbit, following the path Ocean had established, Ethan was struck by the improbable nature of their situation. A salvaged prototype never intended for spaceflight, operating on hybrid systems beyond human engineering, guided by an extraterrestrial being with abilities that defied conventional understanding. By any rational assessment, they should not exist in this moment. And yet, here they were, alive and free among the stars. After approximately 40 minutes of orbital travel, Ocean's detection system registered a stronger signal. She refined their course, excitement evident in the increased motion of the filaments atop her head. On the view screen, magnification revealed their destination, a vessel unlike any human spacecraft, its form suggesting the same organic mechanical integration that Ocean had established with their shuttle. "Is that it?" Ethan asked unnecessarily, the answer obvious in Ocean's reaction. She nodded, those silver eyes fixed on the approaching vessel with an intensity that transcended language. As they drew nearer, the craft seemed to respond to their presence, sections illuminating with that same blue energy that flowed through Ocean and their shuttle. "It recognizes you," Ethan realized. "It's activating in response to your proximity." Ocean confirmed this with a nod, guiding their shuttle into alignment with what appeared to be a docking configuration on the larger vessel. As they approached, an opening formed in its hull, not a mechanical door, but a reconfiguration of the material itself, creating an entrance precisely sized for their craft. They settled into the docking area with perfect precision, the shuttle systems interfacing with the vessels through Ocean's continued integration. When the connection was complete, the opening sealed behind them, atmosphere flooding the space around their craft. "Safe to exit?" Ethan asked, uncertain about the environment beyond their shuttle. Ocean nodded, disengaging partially from the shuttle's systems, while maintaining enough connection to control essential functions. The hatch opened to reveal an interior space that defied easy description, neither fully mechanical nor entirely organic, but a harmonious integration of principles from both domains. The vessel's internal atmosphere was breathable for Ethan, though slightly denser than Earth standard, and with a faint mineral scent reminiscent of the ocean. Surfaces that appeared solid responded subtly to their presence, adjusting illumination and perhaps other parameters as they moved deeper into the craft. Ocean led the way with increasing confidence, clearly familiar with the vessel's design, despite having never physically visited it before. They reached what appeared to be a central control area, where surfaces curved to form intuitive interaction points, rather than conventional instrumentation. Here, Ocean fully engaged with the vessel, that blue energy flowing between her and the ship's systems with an intensity that temporarily obscured her silver form from Ethan's vision. When the connection stabilized, she turned to him with an expression of such joy and relief that it transcended the alien features of her face, communicating emotions universally recognizable. "You've done it," Ethan said simply. "You've found your way home." Ocean nodded, but then performed an unexpected action. She approached Ethan and, with deliberate movements, took both his hands in hers. The touch initiated another memory share, but different from previous exchanges. Not images or sensory impressions, but something deeper, more fundamental. Understanding flowed between them, not in words or concepts, but in direct communion of consciousness. Ethan comprehended, for the first time fully, what Ocean had been trying to explain through their limited means of communication. The vessel was indeed a lifeboat of sorts, containing not just technology, but preserved essences of Ocean's people, consciousnesses stored in crystalline matrices that could be reintegrated with appropriate biological vessels. Ocean herself was both an individual and a carrier, her physical form designed to transport multiple preserved identities safely until they could be reunited with others of their kind. The signal that had awakened her in Pool 47 had come from a distant star system, where survivors had established a colony, not a large population, but enough to ensure their civilization's continuation if the preserved essences could be delivered. The vessel contained the navigation coordinates and the means to create the space-folding corridor that would allow the journey to be completed within Ocean's lifetime. Most surprising was the vessel's capacity, designed to transport not only Ocean, but potentially a companion as well. The invitation in her memory share was clear. Ethan could accompany her if he chose, leaving behind a world where he had few meaningful connections to explore possibilities beyond human experience. When the connection ended, Ethan stood silent for several moments, processing the enormity of what had been offered. Ocean waited patiently, those silver eyes conveying both hope and understanding that such a decision could not be made lightly. "How long until the vessel is ready to depart?" Ethan asked finally. Ocean indicated approximately 12 Earth hours, time needed for systems long dormant to fully reactivate and for the space-folding calculations to be completed with precision. "I need to think," Ethan said honestly. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined." Ocean nodded understanding, gesturing to indicate he could explore the vessel freely while she continued the necessary preparations. There was no pressure in her manner, only acceptance that whatever he decided would be respected. Ethan moved through the extraordinary craft, marveling at technologies and principles that human science had not yet approached. Throughout his exploration, his mind grappled with the choice before him: remain on Earth, returning to a life that had held little meaning even before these events, or venture into the completely unknown alongside a being who had transformed his understanding of what was possible. When he finally returned to the central chamber, Ocean was seated in what appeared to be a meditation posture, the blue energy flowing around her in complex patterns as she communicated with the vessel's systems. She opened those silver eyes as he approached, a question evident in her gaze. "Before I decide," Ethan said, "there's something I need to understand. If I choose to stay on Earth, what will happen? Will the agents continue hunting you? Could they track this vessel once it activates the space-folding technology?" Ocean considered these questions carefully, then initiated another brief memory share, just enough to convey that once the vessel fully activated, it would be undetectable by current Earth technology. The space-folding process itself would leave no trace that human instruments could register. She and her precious cargo of preserved consciousnesses would be beyond the hunter's reach forever. "And if I choose to go with you," Ethan continued, "what would that mean? Would I be compatible with your world? Would I have purpose there?" Another gentle memory share, images of a world unlike Earth, yet beautiful in its alien way, where diverse beings coexisted in a civilization based on principles of harmony and knowledge sharing. The preserved consciousnesses Ocean carried included scientists, artists, historians, beings who would value Ethan's perspective and experience as the only human to make such a journey. He would be not merely a visitor, but a bridge between species, his unique viewpoint treasured rather than merely tolerated. "And could I ever return?" Ethan asked the final, crucial question. Ocean's response held honesty, even as it confirmed what he had suspected. The journey would be one way. The energy requirements for space folding were too great, the coordinates too precise, to allow for casual travel between such distant points. Ethan nodded, absorbing this final piece of information. Then, to Ocean's visible surprise, he smiled, a genuine expression of clarity and decision reached. "I've spent my life maintaining systems for others," he said simply, "keeping things functioning while remaining separate from any larger purpose. For the first time, I've been part of something meaningful, something that matters beyond routine and regulation." He gestured toward the viewport, where Earth was visible as a blue crescent against the black of space. "There's beauty there, and I won't pretend I won't miss certain things. But what awaits with you? That's discovery. That's purpose. That's a chance to be part of something extraordinary." Ocean's silver eyes widened slightly, hope evident in her expression. "Yes," Ethan confirmed, his decision made. "I'm coming with you." The joy that transformed Ocean's features transcended the differences between their species, communicating itself in the sudden animation of the filaments atop her head, the brightening of her silver skin, and most of all, in those remarkable eyes that now seemed to contain entire galaxies of possibility. She extended her hand toward him, not to initiate another memory share, but as a simple gesture of connection. Ethan took it without hesitation, feeling that subtle warmth that always accompanied her touch. "So," he said, smiling at the silver child who had changed everything, "what happens next?" Ocean's response was to guide him to a position within the central chamber, where seating surfaces formed to accommodate them both. As they settled into place, the vessel hummed with increasing energy, systems fully awakening after their long dormancy, preparing for the journey ahead. Through the viewport, Earth began to recede as the craft adjusted its orbital position. Ocean maintained her connection with Ethan, allowing him to perceive, at least partially, the extraordinary processes unfolding around them. The space-folding calculations progressed, mapping a pathway between stars that defied conventional physics but aligned with principles Ocean's civilization had mastered ages ago. As the final preparations completed, Ocean turned to Ethan one last time, those silver eyes meeting his with a question that needed no translation. "Ready?" Ethan nodded, his decision unwavering despite the enormity of what lay ahead. "Ready." Ocean smiled, a fully human expression that somehow suited her alien features perfectly, and initiated the final sequence. The space before them seemed to ripple, as though reality itself were a fabric being gently manipulated. Stars streaked and blurred, their light bending along pathways Ethan's mind could barely comprehend. Earth vanished from view, not with the violence of conventional acceleration, but with the elegant transformation of space itself. For a breathtaking moment, Ethan experienced the universe as Ocean perceived it, not as vast emptiness punctuated by distant bodies, but as an interconnected tapestry of energy and possibility, where distances were less absolute than they appeared to human understanding. Then, they were traveling along the space-folded corridor, Earth and its solar system left behind as they journeyed toward a distant home among unfamiliar stars. The tiny alien once drowning, now sailing confidently through the cosmos, and the human who had dared to dive into the unknown, moving together toward whatever wonders awaited them. As the vessel accelerated through the folded space, Ethan felt a strange peace settle over him. Through the viewport, the universe transformed into streams of light and color beyond any human description. Ocean sat beside him, her silver form now pulsing gently with that same blue luminescence that permeated the ship's systems. The filaments on her head moved in graceful patterns, responding to energies Ethan could sense but not fully perceive. "Will it take long?" Ethan asked, finding his voice surprisingly steady despite the extraordinary journey they'd undertaken. Ocean turned those silver eyes toward him, a gentle smile forming on her alien features. She held up her hand, fingers spread wide, then slowly closed them one by one until only a single finger remained extended. 5 days? Ethan guessed. She shook her head slightly, pointing to the strange chronometer displayed on one of the vessel's organic interfaces. 5 cycles, Ethan corrected himself, understanding that the measurement wasn't precisely equivalent to Earth days, but represented the vessel's own temporal framework. "That's remarkably fast for crossing such distances." Ocean nodded, then hesitantly formed words with that voice that seemed to contain harmonics beyond human hearing. "Not distance, folding, the space between folds." Ethan understood, recalling the concepts she had shared during their memory exchanges. "We're not traveling through space so much as rearranging it temporarily." Another nod, accompanied by a pleased expression that he had grasped such a complex concept despite the limitations of human scientific framework. As the journey continued, Ocean showed Ethan more of the vessel's capabilities. Sections that had appeared dormant now activated under her guidance, revealing chambers designed for various functions, some recognizable, others entirely mysterious to human understanding. In one such chamber, crystalline structures housed the preserved consciousnesses Ocean had described, the essence of her people, waiting to be reunited with the colony that had established itself in their new home. Ethan couldn't perceive them directly, but through another gentle memory share, Ocean allowed him to sense their presence, ancient, complex minds in suspended animation, carrying knowledge and perspectives from a civilization far older than humanity's. "They'll be curious about you," Ocean said, her vocabulary expanding rapidly now that she was reconnected with her vessel's language systems. "First human. I imagine I'll have just as many questions for them," Ethan replied, still marveling at the technology that could preserve consciousness itself through such tremendous distances in time. In another chamber, The vessel had created a space specifically adapted for Ethan's human physiology, adjusting atmospheric composition, gravity, and even lighting to approximate Earth conditions. Ocean explained through a combination of words and memory sharing that the ship was designed to accommodate diverse biological needs, capable of sustaining multiple species during long journeys. As they settled into the rhythm of their transit, Ethan found himself reflecting on the chain of events that had led to this moment. A routine night shift, a small silver hand breaking the surface of an experimental pool, a choice made in an instant to dive rather than report, each decision creating a path neither of them could have anticipated. "I still don't understand why you were in that pool," Ethan said during their third cycle of travel. "Was it deliberate? Did someone put you there specifically?" Ocean's expression grew pensive, the filaments on her head moving more slowly as she accessed memories that seemed to cause discomfort. Through careful words and brief memory shares, she gradually revealed what had happened. She had been held in a different facility originally, part of a classified program studying the biological capabilities of the extraterrestrial beings captured over decades. When signs of unusual activity began registering from her dormant vessel in orbit, the activation signal she had mentioned, the researchers had detected corresponding changes in her physical state. Fearing what these changes might indicate, and wanting to prevent any possible communication with the orbiting vessel, they had transferred her to Helios 9 for more intensive study. Specifically to Pool 47 with its unique chemical composition designed to replicate her species' native environment. What they hadn't anticipated was that this environment, rather than suppressing her abilities, would actually enhance them, allowing her to more clearly perceive the vessel's signal. During a moment when monitoring was temporarily reduced, she had attempted to remove the restrictive collar, not entirely successfully, which led to her becoming tangled and nearly drowning. "Then I appeared," Ethan concluded. Ocean nodded, reaching out to touch his hand briefly, a gesture of gratitude that conveyed more than words could express. "Not coincidence," she added, those silver eyes holding his with unusual intensity. "Pattern." Ethan wasn't sure if she meant some greater cosmic design, or simply the improbable statistical alignment of circumstances that had brought them together. But he found comfort in the idea either way. Their meeting, however unlikely, had created something meaningful from what could have been tragedy. By the fifth cycle, the vessel indicated they were approaching their destination. The folded space corridor began to stabilize, the streaming lights outside the viewport resolving gradually into more recognizable celestial formations. Ocean's excitement was palpable, the filaments on her head moving with increased animation as she communicated more actively with the ship's systems. The preserved consciousnesses showed signs of increased activity as well, the crystalline matrices housing them pulsing with more intense light as they prepared for arrival. "Almost there," Ocean said, her silver eyes shining with anticipation. Home. Ethan felt a mixture of emotions: excitement at what lay ahead, faint apprehension at being the only human in an entirely alien civilization, and a quiet sadness for the world he had left behind. Not regret. He remained certain of his choice, but acknowledgement of what had been sacrificed for this extraordinary journey. The space-folding corridor began to dissipate as the vessel decelerated, reality reasserting its conventional properties around them. Through the viewport, a star system came into view, not dissimilar to Earth's sun and planets in basic arrangement, but with subtle differences in coloration and orbital patterns. Ocean pointed to the third planet from the central star, a world predominantly covered in what appeared to be oceans, though with a different hue than Earth's blue waters. Even from this distance, Ethan could discern unusual atmospheric patterns and what might have been floating structures rather than conventional continents. Deephorn Colony, Ocean named it, the words carrying reverence and hope. As they approached the planet, the vessel activated communication systems, sending signals in patterns Ethan couldn't comprehend but which Ocean clearly recognized. The response was immediate. Lights appearing on the planet's surface, arranged in formations that matched the glowing symbols Ocean had created in the water during their time on Earth. Their descent into the atmosphere revealed the true nature of what they had observed from space. The planet's surface was indeed primarily liquid, but not water as Ethan understood it. A denser, more mineral-rich compound that glowed with subtle bioluminescence in deeper regions. The floating structures were massive, organic technological hybrids. Cities built not on solid ground, but designed to exist in harmony with the liquid environment. The vessel was guided to one such structure, larger than the others, its architecture suggesting ceremonial or governmental significance. As they settled into a docking configuration, Ethan could see gathered crowds of beings similar to Ocean in general form, but with variations in size, coloration, and the configuration of the filaments that served sensory functions. "They're waiting for us," Ethan observed, a flutter of nervousness finally breaking through his composure. "For you. Really?" Ocean shook her head firmly. "For us," she corrected, reaching for his hand with those delicate silver fingers. Both important. The vessel completed its docking procedures, systems interfacing with the larger structure in that same seamless integration of biological and technological principles. Ocean led Ethan to the exit portal, where the hull reconfigured to create an opening onto a platform extending from the city structure. Before stepping through, she turned to him one last time, those remarkable silver eyes meeting his with an expression that needed no translation across species barriers: gratitude, fellowship, and the shared understanding of what they had accomplished together. "Ready?" she asked, echoing his own question from their departure. Ethan took a deep breath of the vessel's familiar atmosphere, preparing himself for whatever lay beyond. A new world, a new civilization, a new purpose unlike anything he could have imagined during his quiet nights at Helios 9. "Ready," he confirmed, and together they stepped forward to meet the waiting delegation, the tiny alien who had once been drowning, now returned triumphantly to her people, and the human who had dared to dive into unknown waters, finding in that simple act of courage the beginning of an extraordinary journey among the stars.